Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Before we begin, I just want to say that Ranger Screams really needs your support right now. If you enjoy these stories, let's try to reach 1,000 likes and 1,000 comments together. Every like and comment means so much to me and truly helps the channel. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. The first thing Ward Petrosky ever said to me was, "Don't sign anything." I was 26 years old, standing in the gravel lot behind the Sable Fork Ranger Station with a duffel bag over my shoulder and a seasonal appointment letter folded in my back pocket, and I thought he was making a joke about government paperwork. I laughed. He didn't. He looked at me the way a farrier looks at a horse he's been asked to save, tired and already calculating, and then he took my duffel out of my hand like I was a guest and not an employee, and carried it into the bunkhouse himself. That was 11 years ago. Ward has been dead for 4 of them. I'm the one who carries the notebook now, and I'm the one who stands in that gravel lot every June and tells the new hires not to sign anything. And they laugh, and I let them. I'm writing this down because the notebook is falling apart. The cover is water-stained and the spine has cracked twice and been taped both times. And there are entries in it written in 4 different hands going back to 1948 as far as I can tell, though Ward believed the first pages were copied out of something older. Paper doesn't last forever. Rangers don't either. Sable Fork will still be here after all of us, patient as a held breath, and there will be new people walking into that gravel lot with their boots still stiff. So the rules. All of them in order, with the reason each one exists. The reasons are the important part. Ward taught me that. A rule you don't understand is a rule you'll talk yourself out of at 3 in the morning when you're cold and scared, and something is standing at the edge of your headlamp beam using your mother's voice. If you've come here looking for a story about bears, you can stop reading. Bears are the easiest thing in this park. Bears follow rules of their own, and they keep them. Sable Fork National Park covers 1,100 square miles of the northern Selkirks, most of it vertical, all of it wet. 9 named peaks over 9,000 feet, 430 miles of maintained trail, and probably twice that in game paths and old miners' cuts and things that look like trail from a distance and aren't. 2 roads in, one of which closes with the first hard snow and doesn't reopen until late June. We get about 90,000 visitors a year, which sounds like a lot until you understand that 88,000 of them never go farther than the Kettle Creek boardwalk in the gift shop. The rest go into the backcountry, and the backcountry is mine. Our search and rescue numbers are ordinary. That's the thing people miss when they look for a pattern. We aren't the Bermuda Triangle. We lose 2 or 3 people a decade, which for a park this size and this steep is actually a little better than average. And every single one of those losses has a mundane explanation on the incident report. Fell, drowned, hypothermia, presumed drowned, body not recovered. Ward used to say that the paperwork at Sable Fork is the most honest paperwork in the Park Service, because none of it lies about anything except the one thing it can't say. The one thing it can't say is that the park is inhabited, not haunted. I want to be precise because precision is the only weapon I've ever had here. Haunted implies something left over, an echo, a stain. What lives at Sable Fork isn't left over from anything. It was here before the survey parties, before the Kalispell came up the drainage in summer to fish and left again before the leaves turned, which they did, deliberately, every year. And if you ever wondered why nobody wintered in a valley that rich, well, they were smarter than we are. They didn't need a notebook. They just didn't stay. We stay. So we need rules. Ward gave me my first one on my 9th day, and he gave it to me wrong on purpose. I've thought about that a lot since. He could have sat me down that first week and read me the whole list, and I'd have nodded along and believed exactly none of it, and then I'd have died in August. Instead, he gave me one rule, no explanation, in a tone that made it sound like a piece of trail etiquette. If somebody knows your name before you tell it to them, he said, you don't answer. You turn around and you walk back the way you came. Not fast, just steady. We were splitting a bag of trail mix on the tailgate of the green truck at the Kettle Creek trailhead. It was mid-June and the snow was still rotting off the north aspects and the whole valley smelled like cold water and pine sap. I said, "Why would somebody know my name?" "Name tag," he said and tapped mine. "Which is why you take it off when you go past the second bridge." "So it's a safety thing? People pretending to be rangers?" "Something like that." He folded the bag over and clipped it shut. He had big hands cracked across the knuckles in a way that never quite healed all summer. "Nora, do me a favor. Don't decide yet whether I'm crazy. Just do it for a season. If I'm crazy, you'll have lost nothing but a name tag." That struck me as fair. That's the other thing about Ward. Everything he asked for was small and always framed as a favor, and by the time you understood what you'd actually agreed to, you'd been doing it for 3 months and it had become instinct. He built you the way you'd build a dry stone wall, 1 stone at a time, no mortar, and then one day you noticed you were load-bearing. I took my name tag off past the second bridge, every time. For 9 days it meant nothing. On the 10th day it saved my life. It was a Thursday in late June, low visitation, clouds sitting on the ridgelines like a lid. I was doing a solo patrol up the Kettle Creek drainage to the Blackwater Junction, 12 miles round trip, mostly to check the winter damage on the switchbacks below Cordy Pass and count the people at the backcountry sites. I remember I was in a good mood. I remember that specifically because of the contrast. I'd found a bull moose in the willow flats at mile 3 and sat on a rock for 20 minutes watching him strip leaves with that ridiculous prehensile lip, and I'd thought, they are paying me to be here. I was 26. That thought still felt like getting away with something. The Blackwater Junction is a wide spot where 4 trails come together under a stand of old cedar. There's a wooden signpost, a bear box, and a log somebody dropped there in the 80s that everyone sits on. When I came up the last rise, there was a man sitting on the log. He was in his 50s maybe, gray-brown hair cut short, a green soft-shell jacket, dark pants, boots that had seen actual mileage, a small day pack on the ground beside him. He was drinking from a steel water bottle and looking down the Blackwater Trail like he was waiting for someone to come up it, and when he heard my boots on the gravel he turned and smiled, and it was a good smile, warm and slightly rueful, the smile of a man who's tired and glad to see another person. "Morning," I said. "Morning, Nora. I want to be clear about what happened in my body. Nothing dramatic. My hands didn't shake. What happened was that a very small, very cold spot opened up right behind my sternum, and everything else, the moose, the cedar smell, the good mood, went a long way away like I was seeing it through the wrong end of a scope. My name tag was in my chest pocket. It had been in my chest pocket since the second bridge 4 miles back. "Sorry," I said. My voice came out normal. "I've never been prouder of anything. Have we met?" "Oh, you probably don't remember," he said, easy as anything. "Visitor center, couple weeks back. You gave me a map." He gestured vaguely down the valley with the water bottle. "You've got a good face for it. Memorable." Now here's the thing. That was completely plausible. I had worked 3 shifts at the visitor center in June. I had given out probably 400 maps. There was no reason in the world that a friendly, middle-aged hiker couldn't have read my name tag 2 weeks ago and had a decent memory for names. And I want you to understand that this is how it always goes. It is never impossible. It is only slightly unlikely, and it is always accompanied by a completely reasonable explanation, offered before you ask for it. That last part is what got me. He explained before I asked. "Sure," I said. "Sorry, long day already. You headed up to Cordy?" "Thinking about it." He capped the bottle. "Is the snow off the traverse?" "Mostly. There's a slab about 200 yards below the notch, north-facing, still icy in the morning." "You've got micro spikes?" "In the pack." "Then you'll be fine." And that was the whole conversation. 60 seconds. Perfectly ordinary. And the entire time, the cold spot behind my sternum was getting bigger, and Ward's voice was in my head saying, "Not fast, just steady." And I was doing arithmetic. 12 miles round trip. I was 6 miles in. If I turned around here, I'd have to write up why I hadn't completed the patrol. That's how they get you. Not with terror. with the mild social embarrassment of doing something strange in front of a person who is being nice to you. I said, "I'm going to head back down, actually. Radio's acting up and I'm not supposed to be past the junction without comms." "That's a shame," he said. "It's beautiful up top." "Next week." "Next week," he agreed, and smiled again. And here is the part I've never been able to explain properly to anyone who wasn't there. He did not stand up. He did not offer to walk down with me. He didn't ask a single question about the trail, the weather, the water sources, the bears, the campsite permits. None of the 6 or 7 things that every solo hiker asks a ranger, every time, without exception. Because when you meet a ranger in the backcountry, you have a limited time information resource in front of you, and human beings always mine it. He just sat on the log and let me go. I walked back down the way I'd come, steady. I did not look over my shoulder, which took about as much willpower as I've ever spent on anything, and about a quarter mile down where the trail bends around a shoulder of rock and the junction goes out of sight, I stopped and stood very still and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no water bottle, no pack being lifted. 6 miles of silence and my own pulse. When I got back to the truck, it was almost 6 in the evening and Ward was sitting on the tailgate in the last of the light with a thermos, which was not normal, because Ward was off shift at 4 and lived 30 miles down valley in a house with a wife and a dog and a satellite dish. He looked at my face and he didn't say anything at all for about 10 seconds. Then he said, "Name tag on or off?" "Off." "He use your name?" "Yes." Ward closed his eyes. "It's strange. I expected fear or triumph or, 'I told you so.' What I got was relief so total it looked like exhaustion, like a man setting down something he'd been holding above his head. "Okay," he said. "Get in the truck. I'm going to buy you a hamburger, and you're going to be angry with me for about an hour. And then I'm going to give you a notebook." I was angry for closer to 3 hours. Most of it wasn't at him. Most of it was the specific, humiliating anger of a person who has just found out the world has a room in it she wasn't told about, and everyone else has been standing in the hallway watching her walk past the door. We sat in the back booth of a diner in Corbin that has since closed, and he let me get through the anger without arguing with any of it. And when I finally ran out, he turned his coffee cup around twice on the table and said, "Do you want to quit? Because that's a real option and nobody will think less of you. 2 of my seasonals quit in the first month and both of them are alive, and one of them sends me a Christmas card. I don't want to quit. I want you to tell me what that was. I can't." "Ward, I can't, Nora, not won't. 31 years and I don't know what they are. I know what they do." He held up his hand and started folding fingers down. "They know things they shouldn't know. They can't be photographed usefully. You'll get a blur or a person, and either way, you won't trust it later. They don't ask questions. They don't eat, and they don't drink, though they'll hold a bottle to their mouth and they don't wet their lips. Dogs won't track them, and they will not lay a hand on you unless you let them. Unless I let them. That's the whole game." He leaned back. "You've got to understand this or none of the rest of it makes sense. Everything at Sable Fork runs on permission. They can't take. They can only be given. So they spend their whole existence trying to arrange a situation where you hand something over and think it was your idea." "Hand what over?" Ward looked out the window at the parking lot for a while. "Your name first," he said, "which is why they use it. If you'd answered to it, not just talked to him, answered to it, said, 'That's me,' agreed you were Nora, that's a door open a crack. Then he'd have wanted you to go with him a little way, then to help him with something, then to say yes to something small in the dark." He shook his head. "There's no single moment where a person gets taken. It's 100 small yeses. That's why the rules are all so stupid and specific. You can't win an argument with them. You can only refuse to have the argument." He took a folded notebook out of his jacket, old soft cover, the kind you can buy at any hardware store with a rubber band around it. He put it on the table between us, but he kept 2 fingers on it. "Before you take this," he said, "understand what it costs. You will never be able to hike alone in this park again without counting. You will hear you're dead. Everybody does eventually. And you can't tell anyone outside because there's no way to say it that doesn't end the conversation. Is that a threat? It's a job description. He slid it across. Rule 1's on the first page. You already know it. Write down how you learned it in your own words and date it. Everybody who's carried this has done that. Someday somebody's going to read your entry and it's going to be the reason they don't die, and you'll never know which one it was. I opened it in the truck on the drive back, with the dome light on and the wipers going, and the first page said in handwriting that wasn't Ward's and wasn't recent. Rule 1. If a stranger uses your name before you give it, do not confirm it. Do not deny it. Leave at a walking pace, and do not look back. Underneath, in 8 or 9 different hands going down the page and onto the next, were the dates: 1948, 1952, 1961, 1961 again, 1970, Ward's, 1994. There was one from 1983 that just said Kettle Creek Junction, log by the bear box. He had my sister's laugh. I wrote mine at the kitchen table in the bunkhouse at 11 that night, and my hand was shaking so badly the first 3 words are barely legible. I still have the notebook. It's beside me right now. Rule 2. I learned from a family from Ohio who never knew anything was wrong. It was the second week of July, peak season, blue sky, the kind of day where the whole park behaves like a postcard and you almost forget. I was posted at the Kettle Creek trailhead doing permit checks, which is the least glamorous work we do, and, I have since come to understand, one of the most important. The Vogels came through at 9 in the morning. Father, mother, 2 teenage kids, and a family friend they introduced as Uncle Rob, who was not actually an uncle. 5 people. I checked their permit, which listed 5 people. I did the whole speech: water sources, bear hang, don't cut switchbacks. The group site at Martin Meadow is the one with the 2 big boulders. Don't take the unmarked path northeast from the meadow, because it's an old miner's cut that dead ends in a scree field. The mother, Diane, asked me to take a picture of them under the trailhead sign. I did. 5 people. I remember the composition because the youngest kid made a face and I said, "Do you want another one where you look normal?" And she said no. They came out 2 days later at 4 in the afternoon, sunburned and pleased with themselves, and there were 6 of them. I want to describe exactly what that's like, because when people imagine this kind of thing, they imagine a spike of horror, and it isn't. It's a slow, sick failure of arithmetic. I looked up from the sign-out sheet and saw the group coming down the last 100 yards, and something in the back of my head said, "That's a bigger group than I remember." And the front of my head immediately said, "No, they've picked up hikers. People walk out together all the time." And that explanation was so smooth and so reasonable that it took me 4 or 5 seconds to look again. 6, father, mother, 2 kids, Uncle Rob, and a woman in her 30s in a red rain shell walking on the outside of the group next to the mother, close enough to be with them. I said, "How was Martin Meadow?" "Buggy," said the father, laughing. "Otherwise perfect." And the woman in the red shell laughed too, at exactly the right moment, at exactly the right volume, and looked at Diane Vogel with a warm, sideways expression like they'd shared 400 miles and a bad tent night. And Diane Vogel looked back at her and smiled. Here is the thing I need you to understand about that smile. Diane Vogel was not afraid. Diane Vogel was not confused. Diane Vogel had been walking beside that woman for some unknown number of hours, and in Diane Vogel's mind, there had never been a moment when the woman was not there. Rule 2 exists because of what I did next, and I did it wrong, and I got lucky. I said, "I'm sorry. I've got you on the permit as a party of 5. The whole group stopped. 5 faces turned to me with the mild, bureaucratic anxiety of people who think they might be in trouble about a fee. The 6th face turned too, and the 6th face was pleasant and open and interested, and it looked directly into my eyes and waited to see what I would say, and it was, I swear to you, encouraging me. It wanted me to finish the sentence. It wanted me to say, "Who is she?" out loud, in front of them, and make 5 people turn and look and try to answer. I don't know what happens then. Ward never knew either. His guess, and he was careful to call it a guess, is that when everybody in a group is made to consciously agree that a stranger belongs to them, that's a yes. A collective one, the strongest kind. What I actually said was, "But that's my error. I've got the wrong line. You're fine. Everybody sign here, please." I held out the clipboard, and I passed it deliberately to Uncle Rob, who was standing on the far end, and I said, "One signature per person, print and sign, and can you just call out the names as you go so I can hear them?" Radio's been eating my paperwork all week. Petty little lie. It worked. They went down the line calling out names. Greg, Diane, Aaron, Sophie, Rob. And when the clipboard reached the woman in the red shell, there was a pause of maybe half a second. Half a second is a very long time when you are standing in a gravel parking lot in bright sunshine with your mouth full of copper. And then she smiled at me and handed the clipboard back to Diane without writing anything, and said, "Oh, I'm not with them," and walked away up the road toward the campground. Nobody reacted. Not one of the 5 of them so much as turned their head to watch her go. Greg Vogel asked me about the fastest route back to the highway, and I answered him, and I remember thinking, with a kind of hysterical clarity, I am giving driving directions. I found Ward at the station at 6. He listened to all of it standing up with his hat still on, which meant he was taking it seriously. "You didn't make them look at her," he said. "No. And you didn't ask her a direct question." "I asked her to sign. That's not, is it?" "It's close." He rubbed his jaw. "Close is fine. Close is the job." "Nora, that's good work. That's better than good." Then, and he was already walking toward the map wall as he said it, "How many people came out compared to how many went in?" "One more." "Right. So, here's your second rule, and here's why it's the one that'll save the most lives, so write it big." He pulled the drainage map down off its hooks and laid it flat on the counter. "Count at the trailhead. Count at every water crossing. Count at the pass. Count before you sleep and count when you wake up. Say the number out loud to yourself and never let anyone else say it for you. And if the number's wrong? If it's low, that's a rescue and that's an ordinary bad day and you'll be fine. If it's high," he tapped the map twice with 2 fingers. "Nobody talks. Nobody points. You keep walking. You keep the group moving downhill and toward the road. And you do not let anybody in your party say, 'Who are you?' out loud. They can just walk with us forever? They'll get bored." He said it flatly, and it was somehow the worst thing he'd said yet, because he said it the way you'd talk about weather. They want a yes, and if the yes isn't coming, they'll leave and try somebody dumber. The danger isn't the walking. The danger is the moment where a scared person tries to make it make sense. That's Rule 2. Rule 2. Count your party at the trailhead, at every water crossing, and at every camp. If the number is higher than it should be, do not name it, do not point, do not photograph. Walk out. The extra will leave on its own. I've used Rule 2 9 times in 11 years. 6 of those were a miscount on my part, and I'd like to tell you the relief of a recount coming out right is something you get used to. It isn't. The other 3 were not miscounts. Rule 3 cost me more than the others. I'll try to tell it straight. By September of that first season, I was a believer, in the practical way that matters. Not that I'd have said any of this out loud to another human being, but that my body had started obeying without consulting me. My hand came up to my name tag at the second bridge automatically. I counted heads in groups I passed, other people's groups, involuntarily, the way you'd read a sign you didn't intend to read. Ward and I were running the tail end of a search for a man named Petrie, 61, day hiker, separated from his wife on the Blackwater Loop on a Tuesday afternoon. That's not a hard search. The Blackwater Loop is 7 miles of well-graded trail with a stream on one side, and the terrain does most of the work for you. We had 18 people on it by Wednesday morning, dogs, a helicopter making passes when the cloud lifted. We found him Thursday, 2 miles off the loop up a drainage nobody had any reason to go up. He'd been dead about a day and a half, hypothermia most likely. He'd taken his jacket off, which is a thing hypothermic people do, and it was folded, on a rock beside him. He was 400 vertical feet up a slope of loose rock and Devil's Club, in the dark, at 61 years old, with a bad knee. And I have never in my life been able to think of a reason a man like that climbs a slope like that except one. Somebody called him. The dogs wouldn't go up the drainage. I want that in the record. 2 dogs, both certified, both eager all week, and at the mouth of that drainage they simply stopped and sat down and looked at their handlers with an expression I can only describe as, "No thank you." That night I couldn't sleep, so I did the stupidest thing I have ever done. I went back, not to the drainage. I want to be clear that I wasn't completely gone. I drove to the Blackwater trailhead at 11 at night and walked in a mile and a half to the first bench above the creek, where you can see the whole upper valley when there's a moon, and there was a moon, and I sat down on a rock and I was angry, I think. That's the honest word. Angry at a park I'd fallen in love with in June. Angry that a man had folded his jacket. At maybe midnight, somebody called my name from up the slope. It was Ward's voice. Completely. Not an approximation, not a spooky whisper. Ward's actual voice, with the rasp he got in dry weather, and the way he clipped the end of my name so it came out Nor, and it said, "Nora, hey, I'm up here." Everything in me stood up. Everything. I was on my feet before I made any decision to be, with my headlamp in my hand, and my mouth was already open. And what stopped me? And I've had 11 years to examine this, and I'm still not fully satisfied with the answer, was not courage and not discipline and not the notebook. It was a very small, very stupid detail. Ward's truck hadn't been in the lot. That's all. That's the whole thing that saved my life. Not Ward is at home asleep 30 miles away, which was also true and which my brain had somehow declined to raise. Just, the lot was empty when I parked, and I'd noticed it the way you notice anything, in passing without significance, and now the noticing came back up like a bubble. I sat down again, very slowly. I turned my headlamp off, which felt like taking off armor, and I sat in the dark on a rock above Blackwater Creek and listened to Ward's voice call me 11 more times over the next 40 minutes. It got closer. It stayed on the slope, up and to the left, and it moved without any sound of movement. No rock shift, no brush, nothing. Just the voice arriving from a slightly different place each time. And it changed. That's the part that I don't talk about. It started with, "I'm up here," and it went through, "Are you okay? I saw your truck," and "I twisted my ankle, I'm not kidding." And it ended around 1:15 in the morning with a long silence and then very quietly from about 40 feet away. "You're going to make me say please?" I did not answer. I sat there until the sky started going gray behind Cordy Pass, and there were birds, and then I walked out at a walking pace and drove to the station and sat in the parking lot until Ward showed up at 7, and when he got out of his truck I burst into tears in front of a man I'd known for 4 months. He didn't hug me. He got me a coffee and sat in the passenger seat of my own car and let me shake. "It used my voice," he said eventually. Not a question. "How did you know?" "Because it's what I'd use." He looked straight ahead through the windshield. "It picks the person you'd go for, not the person you love most. The person you'd go for. Those aren't the same thing, and it knows the difference better than you do." Then he said the thing that became Rule 3, and he said it like a man reading a sentence off a wall he'd read 1,000 times. "Nothing that is really lost calls your name from off the trail. Nothing that is really hurt gets quieter as it gets closer. Nothing that really needs you will ever ask you to leave the path to prove it. Rule 3. Never answer a voice that calls you from off trail, no matter whose voice it is, especially if it's someone who could not possibly be there, especially if it's someone who is dead." There's a footnote to Rule 3 in the notebook, added in 1970 in small, careful capitals, and it reads, "It is not them. It has never once been them." Somebody has traced over those words with a pen at least 3 times. The paper is nearly worn through. I traced over them again in 2016 after my brother died. I hiked up to Belltooth in July of my 2nd season to swap out her propane and deliver mail. She fed me instant noodles and asked me 3 questions about my life, and then said, apropos of nothing, "Ward tells me you're the notebook now." I nearly dropped the bowl. "He's not supposed to—" "There are 4 of us who know," she said. "Me, Ward, Ilsa Barrow down in the archive, and Deke on dispatch. It's not a club, honey. It's a bucket brigade." She poured hot water. "How many rules have you got?" 4. That I've earned. There are more in the book. You'll earn them." She turned and looked out the west glass at the tarn, which from up there is a flat black coin sunk in gray rock. "Has anybody given you the lake yet?" "No." "Then I will, and then you're going to argue with me, and then I'm going to tell you about Dennis Aoki, and then you won't. Here is the rule, exactly as she said it. Never let your light be the only light on that water after dark. Not a headlamp, not a phone, not a camera flash, not a lantern in a tent with the fly open. If you're at the tarn at night, you go dark, or you go under the trees, or you leave." I said, "Why?" "Because it looks back at what looks at it," she said. "And a light in the dark on flat water is a face. It sees a face, and a face is an address." I said, "And I'm not proud of this." "Hattie, that's not a rule, that's a poem." She laughed at me, full, delighted, unoffended. Then she told me about Dennis Aoki. Dennis Aoki was a landscape photographer from Portland who came in with a permit in August of 1997 to shoot the tarn at night. Long exposures of the Milky Way over Cordy's north face. He had good gear, good skills, a good plan, and no reason at all to think there was anything wrong with the lake. He was found on the shore at 11 the next morning by a party of climbers, alive, physically unhurt. Some scrapes on his hands and knees consistent with crawling. His tripod was still standing at the water's edge with the camera on it. The camera's battery was dead, and the memory card had 106 exposures on it. "The first 81 are exactly what you'd expect," Hattie said. "Beautiful, honestly. Somebody at the university published 2 of them. Stars, the face of Cordy, the reflection. Textbook. Number 82 is the same shot, except there's a light out on the water about a third of the way across. Little one. Could be anything. Could be a lens flare. Could be a satellite. Could be somebody's headlamp on the far shore, except there's no trail on the far shore. 83, the light's closer. 84 closer. All the way to 104. And in 104 it's maybe 15 feet off the shoreline, and you can see it isn't on the water, it's under it, about a foot down, and it's the same color and shape as Dennis Aoki's headlamp." I said, "And 105? 105's a picture of Dennis Aoki." She said it calmly, stirring her noodles. "From the water, looking up the beach at him standing at his tripod with the remote in his hand. That's not. And 106 is nothing. Black frame. Cap on, they figured." Dennis Aoki never spoke again, not one word, ever, to anyone, including his sister, who took care of him for 19 years in a house outside Salem, until he died of an entirely ordinary stroke in 2016. He wasn't catatonic. He'd write notes. He worked a little, in a print shop. He would write down yes and no and thank you, and he could laugh at things. He would not make a sound. Not a cough, not a sneeze that anyone recorded, not a snore. His sister said in an interview once that the house was the quietest house in the world. "It took his voice," Hattie said. "I don't know how it got permission. My guess, and Ward hates this guess, is that he answered something. Out loud, alone, at 2 in the morning, at a lake with a light on it. That's all it'd take." I hiked down off Belltooth that afternoon and around the tarn, which the trail does, and I stood on the shore in bright July daylight with 100 tourists' worth of sun on my neck and looked at the water. It's beautiful. That's the thing I can never get across. It is one of the most beautiful places I have ever stood, and I have stood there hundreds of times since, and every time some part of me thinks, what a nice place. That's not irony. That's the actual danger. The park does not feel wrong. If it felt wrong, we wouldn't need a notebook. We'd need a fence. Rule 5. After full dark, no light on Blackwater Tarn, no headlamp, no screen, no flash, no lit tent within sight of the water. If you are caught at the tarn at night, go dark and go under the trees and wait for morning. Do not speak while you wait. Dwayne Cobb, Deke to everyone, ran dispatch at Sable Fork for 26 years out of a room the size of a closet with 4 radios, a coffee maker, and a picture of his daughter's graduation taped to the console. He was the single least mystical human being I have ever met. He watched football. He had opinions about tires. Deke gave me Rule 6 over the phone at 3:40 in the morning while it was happening. November 3rd season. I was doing a winterization run on the Martin Meadow cabin and staying the night, alone, snow on the ground, radio propped on the shelf by the bunk. And at 3:00-something in the morning, the radio woke me up. Sable Fork Base to backcountry. You copy? I was still 90% asleep. I got my hand on the radio and I got my thumb on the key, and what stopped me, I've come to think of this as the notebook working through my hands before it works through my head, was the phrasing. Deke had never in his life said backcountry. Nobody has. You call a unit. You say a call sign. Even in the sloppiest, most exhausted middle of a search radio traffic, you say a name or a number, because the entire point of radio is knowing who's talking to whom. I lay in the dark with my thumb on the key and did not press it. Sable Fork Base to backcountry. Nora, you copy? That woke me all the way up. I got out of the bunk, took the radio off the shelf, and turned the volume down to almost nothing and got my phone out of my pack. There is no cell service at Martin Meadow. There is, however, a satellite messenger in every winter kit, and I sent the only 3 words I could think of. Is Deke awake? 12 minutes. Longest 12 minutes of that entire winter, with the radio murmuring my name in Deke's voice at 40-second intervals like a man calling a cat. Then the messenger buzzed. This is Deke, don't answer it. Call me on the sat phone. I called. He picked up on the first ring, and the first thing he said in a voice I had never heard him use was, Are you inside with the door barred? Yes. Is your light on? No. Keep it off. I heard him breathe out. Okay. Nora, listen to me. Real dispatch always uses your call sign. Always. First transmission. Every transmission. If a voice on that radio doesn't use your call sign, it isn't me. And it isn't anybody. Turn the squelch up till it stops and go back to sleep. Go back to sleep? It's 3 in the morning. You're 11 miles in, and there's nothing else you can do. That was the most Deke sentence ever spoken. And Nora, it's on the radio, not in the room, it's on the radio. I said, How is it on the radio? There was a silence long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Ilsa Barrow's got a theory, he said. It's not a good one. She thinks they don't make sound at all. She thinks they make you hear, and a radio's just a machine for making you hear. I sat on the floor of Martin Meadow cabin with my back against the bunk frame, holding a satellite phone, and asked the question I'd been not asking for 3 seasons. Deke, what are they? He thought about it. He didn't laugh it off, which I appreciated more than I can say. You ever have a dog? He said. Yeah. You ever notice how a dog will figure out exactly which sound gets it fed? Not the word, the sound. It doesn't know what dinner means. It knows that noise out of your mouth comes before food. He cleared his throat. I think we're the food, and the words are the noise, and they've had a real long time to practice, and I don't think they know what any of it means either. I think there's nothing behind it. That's what gets me. Not that it's evil. That there's nobody home. I've never come up with anything better than that. 11 years and neither has anyone else. Rule 6. Real dispatch always opens with your call sign. If a transmission uses your first name and not your call sign, it is not dispatch. Do not key the mic. Confirm by satellite before responding to any radio traffic between 2 and 5 a.m. The radio was still going when I finally slept. I heard it in and out of dreams. Around 5 it changed once, and instead of Deke it was a woman's voice I didn't know, saying very brightly like a receptionist, Sable Fork Base to backcountry, please confirm you are refusing assistance. I did not confirm anything. In the morning I winterized the cabin, shuttered it, and skied out 11 miles in 4 hours, which is a personal best I have never come close to since. Tomas Ferraro came on in my 4th season. 29, ex-wildland fire, competent as hell, funny, and the single most stubborn person I have ever worked with. I liked him enormously. I want that on the record before I tell the rest of it, because what happened to Tomas was not stupidity. It was something much more ordinary than stupidity. It was a good man refusing to be condescended to. Ward was semi-retired by then, working 2 days a week and living the rest of it on his porch, and the rules had become mine to hand out. I did it the way he had, one at a time, small, framed as a favor. Thomas took Rule 1 and Rule 2 on faith because they cost nothing. Rule 3 he agreed to out of politeness. Rule 4 made him laugh. He never got as far as Rule 7, because Rule 7 found him first. In September, we were doing a 2-day sweep of the upper kettle drainage, checking illegal fire rings after a dry August. Second afternoon, we were bushwhacking a contour line between the trail and the old miners' cuts, and we came out of a stand of hemlock into a small flat clearing with a cabin in it. It was a good cabin. That's the thing. Not a ruin, a squared log building maybe 14 by 16, with a shake roof only half sunk in, a stovepipe, a door, and 2 windows with glass still in them. There was a rusted bucket by the step. There was a woodpile, gray with age but stacked. I knew immediately, not because of anything eerie, because I had spent 4 years staring at the drainage map on the station wall, and there is no structure on that contour, and there has never been a structure on that contour, and I had walked within 300 yards of that spot at least a dozen times. Tomas said, "Well, that's not on the map." I said, "We're leaving." And here is where it went wrong. And it went wrong because of me, because I was so certain and so scared that I skipped the part where you explain. He said, "Hang on, this is a historic structure. We have to report." Tomas, "Now. Nora, it's a building. It's probably a 1910s claim cabin. We're required to..." I grabbed his sleeve. Actually grabbed it, like a parent in a parking lot. And he pulled his arm back and gave me a look I'd never gotten from him before, a look with real anger in it, and he took out his phone and photographed the cabin. 4 photographs. I heard the shutter noise 4 times. We walked out. It took 90 minutes and we didn't speak for 80 of them, and at the end of it he apologized sincerely for the arm thing, and I apologized for grabbing him, and we agreed we were both tired. That night at the station he showed me the pictures. 3 of them were the cabin, clear as day, shake roof, bucket, woodpile. In the 4th one, the door was open. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. Then Tomas said, "I probably took that one from a different angle," which was a completely reasonable thing to say and also plainly untrue, because you could see the same knot in the same log at the same distance in all 4 frames. I said, "Delete them." "No." "Tomas, you want to tell me why?" He wasn't angry anymore. That was worse. He was gentle and patient, and he had decided I was somebody who needed handling. "Because you keep saying because, and Nora, I really like you, but because isn't a reason." So I told him. All of it, everything, 4 hours, the notebook open on the table between us. He listened all the way through, he asked good questions, and at the end, he said the sentence that I have heard in some form from every single person I have ever tried to save. "I hear you. I do. But I've got to see it for myself." He went back on his day off. I know he went back because he told me afterward, and because he showed me what he brought out. He brought out a tin. A small hinged tobacco tin, the kind that used to hold rolling papers, rusted at the seams, and inside it were 4 brass buttons and a folded piece of paper too soft to open. He'd found it on the shelf inside the cabin. He set it on the table in the station kitchen like a man producing evidence in a trial he was certain he'd already won. "It's a cabin," he said. "There's a stove, there's a bunk, there's a tin. It's a 100-year-old claim cabin that got left off the survey, which happens, and the door was open the second time too, because doors sag." I looked at the tin on the table, and I felt the floor go out from under my whole life. "You took something out," I said. "Nora, you took something out of the park that you didn't bring in." Rule 7. If you find a structure that is not on the map, do not enter it, do not photograph it, do not mention it after dark, and above all, do not remove anything from it. Mark the location in writing only. Report it to no one but the notebook. Rule 8. Never take anything out of Sable Fork that you did not carry in. Not a rock, not a bone, not an antler, not a coin, not a tin. If you have taken something, put it back where you found it before dark on the same day. If you cannot, tell someone who knows the rules immediately, and do not sleep alone. We put both of those in the notebook that night. They were already in there in older hands, but we dated new entries. Tomas wrote his own, which not many people do, and his entry is 4 words long. I didn't believe her. He drove up at first light to put the tin back. 6 hours round trip on his day off in the rain. And I have always been grateful that he did it. And I have never once been able to convince myself it made any difference. He couldn't find the cabin. He looked for 5 hours. He had GPS coordinates, he had the photographs, he had a compass bearing and a landmark and a competent man's memory. And there was nothing on that contour but hemlock and Devil's Club, and a flat place where the ground was slightly clear. He brought the tin back down and put it on the table in the station kitchen. And neither of us knew what to do with it. And that is how a rusted tobacco tin came to sit on a shelf in a government building for 11 months, which is exactly as long as Tomas Ferraro had left. I need to back up, because if I tell you what happened to Tomas first, you won't understand it. You need the history. The archive at Sable Fork is in the basement of the administration building in Corbin, and Ilsa Barrow ran it the way a dragon runs a horde. She was 81 when I met her, 4'11", and had been the park historian for 34 years, before retiring into an unpaid position that gave her more authority than the paid one had. I went to her in October, the month after Tomas found the cabin. I brought a box of pastries, which she accepted as tribute, and I asked her about the 1911 survey. She looked at me over her glasses for a good 5 seconds. "Ward send you?" "No." "Good," she said. "He's been waiting 11 years for somebody to come down here on their own." She got the box. It's a document box, gray, unremarkable, and it has never been catalogued, and its label says, Hydrologic Survey, Cordy Drainage, 1911, incomplete, which she told me was her own bit of camouflage, and she was rather proud of it. Here's what's in it, and here's what it means. In the summer of 1911, the Sable Fork Valley was surveyed by a party of 9 men working for a mining consortium out of Spokane that wanted to know whether the galena showing at the head of the kettle drainage went deep enough to justify a road. The party leader was a man named Aldous Carrick, a competent engineer with a mediocre reputation, and he kept 2 journals. The first journal is the official one. It's boring. Elevations, azimuths, weather, the price of mules. The second one is what Ilsa calls the Nightbook, and it is the single most frightening document I have ever held in my hands, and the reason is that it starts out completely sane. Carrick's men began losing time in July. Not people, time. 2 of them would come back from a bearing run reporting 3 hours of work, and the camp clock would say 6. A man sent to the tarn for water came back after 90 minutes with a full bucket and no memory of the walk. Carrick, being an engineer, did what engineers do. He made a chart. Then in August, a man named Ostergaard walked out of camp at night and came back 4 days later, and the entry Carrick wrote about it is 11 words long. Ostergaard returned. It is not Ostergaard. The men will not say so. Nobody left. That's the part I can't get past. 9 men stayed in that valley with a thing wearing their friend's face for another 6 weeks because the alternative was walking out and telling a consortium in Spokane that they'd abandoned a paid survey because of a feeling. By September, Carrick had figured out most of what took us a century to put in a notebook. It's all in there in different words. Don't answer to your name, don't go to a voice, don't let it in, don't take, don't thank. He wrote them as camp orders, and he enforced them, and it worked. Nobody else was lost for the rest of the season, though the entries get stranger and stranger, and there's a period of 8 days in September where every single entry is written in a hand that isn't Carrick's. And then, on the 4th of October, 1911, Aldous Carrick did the thing that made him either the worst man ever to enter this valley, or the only reason any of us can enter it at all. He negotiated. The entry is 2 pages. He calls it the arrangement, and later, just terms. He went to the tarn at night, alone, with a lamp which tells you he'd worked out at least part of it, and he made an offer, and the offer was this. The men would leave in the spring, the claim would be abandoned. the road would not be built. In exchange, and I'm going to paraphrase because his handwriting is nearly impossible, and because Ilse would skin me for quoting a document I don't have permission to publish, the valley would be left to itself and those who came in would be safe, so long as they kept to the forms. The forms, that's the word he uses. Not rules, forms. Ilse put it to me like this, over cold tea in a basement in Corbin. You've been thinking of the rules as safety advice, like a fence around a cliff. They're not. They're the terms of a contract, and you are the party of the second part, and neither party can break it unilaterally. That's why the rules are so specific and so arbitrary. Contracts are always specific and arbitrary. That's what makes them enforceable. So they can't touch us, I said, if we keep the forms. They can't touch you if you keep the forms, she agreed. And every rule in your notebook describes a form, and every one of them, when you break it, isn't a mistake. She tapped the table. It's an offer. You're the one who reopens the negotiation. Every single time. I sat there and thought about the man at the Blackwater Junction, sitting on a log, waiting to see whether I'd confirm my own name. They're not hunting us, I said. No, dear. They're taking meetings. And then Ilse Barrow said the thing that changed how I have done this job every day since. There's one more term in Carrick's arrangement, and it's the reason I let Ward tell you about all this instead of burning the box in 1994. The valley must not be left empty of people who know. Carrick was very clear on that, and he doesn't explain it, and I've had 30 years to think about why. And a contract nobody remembers isn't a contract. It's just a place where things used to be forbidden. She poured more tea. If everyone who knows the form stops coming, the arrangement lapses. And then they'll come down out of the valley to find someone to make a new one with. Tomas did not die dramatically. I want to say that plainly because when I've told parts of this to the few people I've told, they always brace for something loud. And there wasn't anything loud. And the quietness of it is the whole horror. He got tired. It started in November, about 6 weeks after the cabin. He was sleeping 10-11 hours and waking up unrested. He'd sit down at the station kitchen table and I'd come back 40 minutes later and he'd be in the same position with a cold cup of coffee, and he'd blink at me and say something like, "Sorry, I was thinking about something," and not be able to say what. He went to a doctor in Corbin, then a doctor in Spokane. Blood work, thyroid panel, sleep study, MRI. Everything came back within normal limits. The Spokane doctor put him on an antidepressant, which was a reasonable guess, and it did nothing at all. In January, he started sleepwalking. His girlfriend, Priya, she taught 4th grade in Corbin. She was wonderful. She never once got the truth from any of us, and I think about that a lot. Would wake up at 2 in the morning and find him standing at the sliding door in the kitchen with his hand on the latch. Not opening it, just standing there with his hand on it. She'd say his name, and he'd turn around and be completely normal, embarrassed, apologetic, awake. In February, she woke up and he wasn't in the house. She found him in the driveway in bare feet, in the snow, facing east. East is up the valley. He came to me in March. He didn't call it what it was. He said, "I want to go back up and look for it again." And I said, "Absolutely not." And he said, "Nora, I'm not asking permission, I'm telling you where I'll be." We went together. 4 days over 2 weeks, on snowshoes, and we did not find a cabin. And on the last of those days, sitting on a log eating a frozen sandwich, he said the only fully honest thing he ever said to me about it. "It's not that I want to find it," he said. "It's that I keep almost remembering the way." He resigned in April, took a job with a hotshot crew out of Boise, which is what he should have been doing all along, and moved 400 miles from Sable Fork. And I drove down and helped him load the truck, and Priya made us sandwiches for the road, and everybody hugged. He was doing well, that's what everyone said afterward. He was doing well. In August, he took a weekend and drove back, alone. He told Priya he was seeing friends in Spokane. He parked at the Kettle Creek trailhead at 4 in the afternoon on a Friday in August, and he signed the trailhead register, and his entry reads, T. Ferraro, day hike, out by dark. They found the truck Monday. The search took 9 days. 91 people at peak, 3 dogs, 2 helicopters, a drone team out of Missoula, and the entire valley crawled from the trailhead to Cordy Pass. And there was nothing. Not a boot print, not a wrapper, not a scrap of fabric on a branch. I worked all 9 days. I have a photograph somewhere from the 7th, taken by a volunteer, of me sitting on the bumper of the green truck at 11 at night with my head in my hands, and I keep it because I never want to be the version of myself who forgets. On the 4th night of the search, I was alone in the station kitchen at 2 in the morning, and the tin was still on the shelf where he'd left it 11 months before, and I heard the front door of the station open. I did not move. Boots in the hallway. The specific sound of somebody stopping to knock the mud off, which Tomas always did, and which I'd made fun of him for, because he was the only person on staff who wiped his feet in a building with a linoleum floor and a drain in it. And his voice said, "Hey, are you still up?" I sat at that table with my hands flat on the wood. "Nora, come on, I'm right here. Come out and look at me, and I want to tell you that I was brave." What I was so tired that the tiredness went past fear and came out the other side into a kind of flat, clerical calm, and I heard myself say, not to it, to the room, to the notebook, to nothing, "You're not on the trail. You're not off the trail. You're in a building, and I know you can't be in a building." The boots came down the hallway and stopped outside the kitchen door, which was open. Here is the thing about Rule 4 that I did not understand until that night, and that I've written into the notebook in the largest letters on the page. Rule 4 is not about doors. Doors don't matter. The threshold isn't wood, it's the sentence. A thing can stand in an open doorway all night long and never cross it if you never say the words. It stood there for a long time. I did not look up. I looked at the grain of the table and I counted the knots in it, over and over, 31 knots, and I did not look up. At some point it said, in a voice that was not Tomas's anymore and was not anyone's, with no particular emotion at all. He said thank you. And then the station was empty, in the way that a room is empty the second after the pressure changes, and I sat there until it got light. The next morning I took the tin off the shelf, drove to the trailhead, walked in 4 miles, and buried it under a rock cairn 100 yards off the trail on the contour where the cabin had been. I didn't say anything while I did it. I didn't thank anyone. They never found Tomas Ferraro. The report says presumed drowned in Kettle Creek during a high water event, which is the best fiction we could build out of true facts. Rule 9. A threshold is a sentence, not a door. They can stand in an open doorway all night. Do not answer, do not look up, do not acknowledge, and never ever say thank you. 2 years later, on the 9th of October, a family named Hollis lost their 8-year-old son at Martin Meadow. I have run or worked probably 60 searches at Sable Fork. This is the only one I dream about. The facts, from the incident report I wrote myself. The Hollis family, Mother Renata, Father Kev, sons Aiden, 11, and Sam, 8, camped at the Martin Meadow group site on the night of the 8th. On the morning of the 9th, at approximately 7:40, Sam Hollis left the tent to use the privy 60 yards from the site, along a well-worn path in open meadow with clear sightlines. His mother watched him go. She looked away for what she described as less than a minute. He never reached the privy. There was frost on the ground and his prints go 40 yards and stop. Not stop as in scuffed out, stop. 2 clean boot prints in frost and then unbroken frost in every direction for 30 feet. We had people on the ground by 11:40 by 4 in the afternoon, 90 by the next morning. Sheriff's SAR, county volunteers, a dog team from Coeur d'Alene, everybody. And because we're a park, and because a lost child at 8,000 feet with a night coming is the worst arithmetic there is, we ran hard. Ward came in. He was 68, 3 years off the job, with 2 bad knees and a heart he wasn't supposed to be running uphill with. He walked into the incident command tent at 6 in the evening in his old uniform pants and a civilian jacket and said, "Put me on a team or I'll go up on my own." And the incident commander, who was a good man from the county and had no idea what he was actually agreeing to, put him with me. We were Team 4. Me, Ward, 2 county volunteers named Ostrander and Belts, and a fire lookout who'd come down off her tower to help, because Hattie Sung was 72 years old and did not ask permission either. 5 of us. I counted at the trailhead. I counted at the first crossing. I counted at Martin Meadow. 5. We searched the northeast quadrant, which included the old miner's cut that dead ends in the scree field. And we searched it until dark, and then we searched it in the dark, because that's what you do for an 8-year-old. And at 9 at night, we crossed the outlet stream at the top of the meadow. And I counted. 6. I stopped in the middle of the stream with the water going over my boots. Ward was on the far bank. He saw my face and he saw my lips move, and he did the smallest thing. He lifted one hand, palm down, a steady gesture, the same one he'd made 1,000 times about 100 different things. The 6th was walking at the back, behind belts. It was a man in a county SAR jacket with the reflective striping and a radio on his shoulder, and he was wearing a headlamp on red the way you do at night to save your night vision, and he lifted a hand and said, "Careful, it's slick." And Belts said, "Yeah, thanks." Nothing happened. I want to be clear. Nothing happened. Belts thanked a stranger for a warning about a slippery rock, which is the most ordinary sentence in the English language, and the world did not end. But Ward's face went the color of paper. We got everyone onto the bank, and I said, in the most bored voice I could produce, "Okay, we're pulling back to the meadow. It's too dark for this contour. Single file, everybody keep the person ahead in sight. No talking. We're listening for the kid." No talking. We're listening for the kid. That sentence is the best thing I have ever done in my professional life. Ostrander and Belts and Hattie fell into line and shut their mouths and walked, because they thought it was about the boy, and it worked for 11 minutes. Then a voice called from up the slope off the trail about 40 yards up in the timber. "Nora." It was my brother. Wes died on the 14th of March 2016 in an avalanche in the Wallowas, 400 miles from Sable Fork, on a slope he had no business being on, and I got the call at 6:20 in the evening while I was doing dishes, and I have never in my life gotten all the way through a sentence about it. Nora. Hey. Norbear. Nobody has called me that since 2016. Nobody living knows it. My mother is dead. My father has dementia in a facility outside Boise, and Wes made it up when he was 9. I stopped walking. Behind me, the line stopped too. Hattie's hand closed on the back of my pack strap, not pulling, just there, a small, dry 72-year-old hand on my strap. "I'm cold," my brother said. "You know how cold it was. You know exactly how cold it was. You asked them, you made them tell you." Ward said quietly, from the front of the line. "It's 40 yards. It can talk for hours. Walk." You made them tell you how long it takes, and they told you, and you've never told anybody, and I'm still there, I'm still in it. Norbear. It never stopped. It's still going on right now. I want to describe what that does to a person, and I can't. The best I can do is this. It is not like hearing a ghost. It's like hearing the inside of your own head with the lid off. It knew the exact shape of the worst thing in me, and I have no idea how. And Ward's theory was always that they don't read minds, they read faces, over years, patiently, and that everything I ever felt about my brother had been legible on my face at some point in 11 seasons of standing in that valley. I took a step off the trail. I did. I want it in the record, because there is no version of me that gets to stand in front of new hires and pretend I was never the person who took the step. One step. And Hattie Sung's hand tightened on my strap, and Hattie Sung said, right at my ear, in a completely calm voice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, counting us, and the count came out right, because the 6th was gone from the line, because it was up the slope, because it had moved to where the voice was. That's not in any rule. That was Hattie on the spot at 72, and it's Rule 10 now. Rule 10. When one of them is working on someone in your party, count out loud. Count the people you brought. The number is the thing they cannot argue with. Say it as many times as you need to. I got back on the trail. We walked to Martin Meadow and we did not speak. and the voice followed us for 1.5 miles, and it went through Wes and then my mother, and then, near the end, my own voice, which is the single most disgusting thing I have ever heard, and I do not want to talk about what it said. At the meadow there were 40 people, lights, a generator, a coffee urn. It stopped at the edge of the trees. Ward sat down on a log and put his head between his knees for a while. When he looked up, he said, "Sam Hollis is alive." I said, "You can't know that. They took a jacket and radio shape and put it in a search line at 9 at night," he said. "Nora, they don't do that for nothing. They did it because 41 people are up here calling that kid's name, and every single one of them is a person who might answer something." He wiped his face with his hand. "The boy's the bait. He's been the bait since 7:40 this morning." "Then where is he?" And Ward Petrosky, who had been telling me for 11 years that he did not know what they were and did not know what they wanted, said, "There's one more rule. I never gave it to you because giving it to you means telling you why I know it, and I'd rather you thought well of me." Here's what he told me, sitting on a log at Martin Meadow at midnight with a search running around us. In 1993, the year before Ward inherited the notebook, his partner was a man named Cliff Yoon. Same age, same higher class, best friend for 9 years. In September of that year, Cliff went in alone after a reported overdue party of 2, found them fine, radioed it, and did not come out. Ward searched for him. Everybody did. And on the 11th day, alone, off-trail, up the drainage north of the tarn, Ward found the entrance to the Halcyon Adit. An adit is a horizontal mine tunnel driven into a hillside. There were 4 of them in the upper valley from the 1911-1920 era. All of them mapped, all of them gated with steel bat grates in the 1980s for public safety. The Halcyon is the highest and the deepest, 600 feet in, and it's on every map we have. The grate was open, and Cliff Yoon was standing about 10 feet inside it in the dark, in his uniform, with his hands at his sides. "He asked me to come in," Ward said. "He said the word, 'please.' And I stood there for I don't know how long, and then I said," his voice went. He had to stop and start again. I said, "Cliff, I can't." And he said, "I know." And then he said, "Thank you." Ward looked at me, and I said, "You're welcome." I didn't understand. And then I did, and it went through me like cold water. "It thanked me," he said, "and I accepted it. I accepted that something had been given. Nora, I've spent 33 years figuring out what I gave, and the answer is I gave it my goodbye. It got to be the last thing that ever said Cliff's name to me. And it's been standing in that hole ever since, holding on to that, waiting for me to come back and finish the transaction. Ward, there's a rule you don't have, and here it is. They hold. Whatever you give them, they keep, and it stays open, and they will wait your entire life to close it." He stood up, and his knees made a noise I heard over the generator. "Sam Hollis is in the Halcyon Adit, because that's where mine is. Because a thing that's been holding a door open for 33 years is going to put the bait behind that door." I said, "That's not evidence, that's a feeling." "Yes," said Ward. "It is." We went at first light. Not alone. I'm not that far gone. I took it to the incident commander and I told him in the language of the report and not the language of the notebook that a retired ranger with 31 years of local knowledge believed the boy might have followed the old miner's cut to the Halcyon and that the grate had been reported damaged. It wasn't even a lie. Ward reported it damaged that night in writing. 6 of us went up. Me, Ward, Hattie, 2 county SR, and a paramedic named Ashby. I counted at the trailhead and at the crossing and at the mouth of the drainage. 6, 6, 6. The grate was open. The lock was on the ground, intact, unbroken, unlocked. Ashby went in first with a light, because Ashby was 28 and had a job to do and hadn't read anything. 20 feet in, he stopped and said, "Kid?" "I've got the kid." Sam Hollis was sitting on the floor of the tunnel 22 feet inside the Halcyon Adit, in a t-shirt, in October, at 8,200 feet, 31 hours after he'd walked out of a tent to use a privy 4 miles away, and he was not hypothermic. His core temperature was 98.1. He had no injuries. He had dirt on his hands and frost damage on nothing. He was awake. He looked at Ashby's light and he said, "Is it morning?" They carried him out. Renata Hollis got him back at 11:15 in the morning on the 10th of October, and there is a photograph of that in a newspaper somewhere, and I have never been able to look at it for long. Sam is 17 now. He's fine. He remembers nothing between the tent and the tunnel. He says he remembers walking with a lady and can't describe her and has never been troubled by it, and I have made it my business, quietly, once a year, to find out how he's doing, and he is doing well. Ward did not come out. That's the plain fact, and I've never dressed it up. While Ashby and the county guys were bringing the boy out, and Hattie and I were at the mouth setting up for the carry, Ward Petrosky walked into the Halcyon at it. I saw him do it. I was 30 feet away with a rope bag in my hands, and I saw him step over the sill and go in, and I shouted his name. I shouted his name, which is against nothing in the notebook and is the only thing I've ever regretted saying. And he stopped, and he looked back at me over his shoulder, and he said the last words I ever heard from him. "It's an old account, Nor. Somebody's got to close it." We searched that tunnel for 4 days, 611 feet of it mapped, with 3 lateral drifts and a winze that goes down 40 feet to standing water. Cave rescue team out of Butte. Ground penetrating radar, divers in the winze. Nothing. No Ward. Also, and this is in the cave team's report, in language a lot drier than mine, no Cliff Yoon, whose remains had been assumed to be in that drainage for 33 years, and no anything else at all. 611 feet of empty rock. His wife Marjorie buried an empty box in Corbin in November. I gave the eulogy. I said he was the best teacher I ever had, which is true, and that he spent his life keeping people out of places they shouldn't go, which is also true. And every ranger in that church who knew what I actually meant looked at the floor. Rule 11. They hold what you give them, and they will wait your whole life to collect. If you have broken a rule and survived, you have not gotten away with it. Tell someone. Write it down. Do not go back alone to settle it. I've been the notebook for 4 years. Deke retired in the spring and went to Arizona and calls me every couple of months to complain about the heat. Ilsa Barrow died at 90 in her sleep, which she had earned, and left me the gray document box in her will, along with a note that said, in its entirety, "You were the only one who ever brought pastries." I.B. Hattie Sung is 79 and still runs Belltooth every summer, and if you ask her whether that's wise, she'll ask you how your knees are. There are 4 of us now who know, me, Hattie, a dispatcher named Ruben Ortiz who I brought in 2 years ago, and a maintenance foreman named Dell who figured it out on his own in 2009, and never told anybody, which I respect enormously. Every June I stand in the gravel lot behind the station and meet the new seasonals, and I tell them not to sign anything and they laugh. Then I give them Rule 1 and I make it sound like trail etiquette. I've thought a lot about whether Ward's method was right. The slow drip, 1 rule at a time, letting people learn it in the dark. Part of me thinks it's cruel. Part of me thinks I should hand them the whole notebook on day 1 and let them quit if they want to. But I've watched what happens to the ones who get it all at once. Tomas got it all at once in one night at a kitchen table, and it didn't take, because the human mind doesn't file a thing like this under true. It files it under story. And the only way a rule ever moves out of story and into reflex is if you learn it the moment before you needed it. So I do it Ward's way. And I keep a list of who's got which rule, and I don't sleep well in September. Here's the whole notebook, current as of this year. 11 earned rules, and the 12th, which I'm about to explain. The Sable Fork Rules. 1. If a stranger uses your name before you give it, do not confirm it and do not deny it. Leave at a walking pace. Do not look back. 2. Count your party at the trailhead, at every water crossing, and at every camp. If the number is low, that's a rescue. If the number is high, do not name it. Do not point at it. Do not photograph it. Keep the group moving downhill and out. It will leave. Never answer a voice that calls you from off trail. Not a stranger's, not a friend's, not a child's, especially not the dead. It is not them. It has never once been them. Or, nothing comes into a cabin, a tent, or a vehicle without an invitation. Never say come in, get in, or sure through a door or a window. Do not open a door before sunrise. Kai, do not thank them. Do not accept a gift, a favor, a hand, or a warning. If one of them tells you something true, walk away without a word. Viper, after dark, no light on Blackwater Tarn, no headlamp, no screen, no flash, no lit tent within sight of the water. If you're caught there at night, go dark, go under the trees, and be silent until morning. 6. Real dispatch opens with your call sign every time. If a transmission uses your first name and not your call sign, do not key the mic. Confirm by satellite. 7. If you find a structure that is not on the map, don't enter it, don't photograph it, don't speak of it after dark. Mark it in writing. Report it to the notebook and to nobody else. 8. Never carry out what you didn't carry in. Not a rock, a bone, an antler, a coin, or a tin. If you've taken something, put it back before dark the same day. 9. A threshold is a sentence, not a door. They will stand in an open doorway all night. Don't answer. Don't look up. 10. When one of them is working on someone in your party, count out loud. Say the number you brought. Keep saying it. 11. Whatever you give them, they hold, and they will wait your whole life to collect it. If you've broken a rule and lived, you didn't get away with it. Tell someone, write it down. Never go back alone to settle it. 12. Do not be the last one who knows. Rule 12 is mine. I wrote it the week after Ward's funeral, and I've had 4 years to decide whether to take it out, and I've kept it. It's the only rule in the book that isn't about protecting yourself. Every other rule is a fence around one person. 12 is a fence around the valley. Ilse's point about the arrangement is the whole reason. The forms only hold as long as there are people keeping them. If everyone who knows the rules retires or dies or gets transferred to a park in Utah, or decides that 11 years of their life was a kind of shared delusion, then Sable Fork isn't a place with an agreement anymore. It's just 1,100 square miles of mountains with something patient in them, and 90,000 visitors a year who've never been told anything. So, don't be the last one who knows. Bring someone in. Do it slowly. Do it Ward's way. And do it before you think you need to. Because you will not get to choose the day you stop. That's why this exists. That's the entire reason. If you're reading this and you've never been to Sable Fork and never will, then it's a story and I hope it was a good one. And I'd rather you enjoy it than believe it. But if you're reading this because you took a seasonal job in a park somewhere and something happened on a trail 2 weeks ago that you can't stop thinking about, the person who knew your name or the count that came out wrong or the voice up the slope, then I want you to hear the only useful thing I've learned in 11 years. It is never dramatic. It will never announce itself. It will be a friendly man on a log with a completely reasonable explanation, offered before you ask for it. It will be a woman in a red jacket walking out with a family from Ohio. It will be your best friend's voice on the other side of a door saying it's cold, saying please, saying, are you really going to make me ask twice? And every single time, all it will want is one small, polite, ordinary yes. Don't give it one. Take your name tag off past the second bridge. Count at the crossings. Walk, don't run. And when something out there in the dark says your name in a voice you'd know anywhere, in a voice you have been waiting 4 years or 9 years or your whole life to hear again, let it finish. Let it say the whole thing. Let it beg. And then keep walking down the trail toward the road. And don't answer and don't look back and don't say thank you. I'll be at the gravel lot in June. There's always a bunk open. N. Quillen, Sable Fork National Park. The notification for my transfer came on a Tuesday. I'd been working as a park ranger at Yellowstone for nearly 8 years, and I'd gotten comfortable with the routine. Too comfortable, according to my supervisor. "You need a challenge, Parker," he'd said, sliding the folder across his desk. "The Navajo Nation has requested experienced rangers for a special assignment in their territory. They specifically asked for someone with your background in wildlife management." I flipped through the paperwork, noting the remote location on the borders of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Canyon de Chelly, a system of sandstone canyons sacred to the Navajo people. Beautiful, isolated, and completely different from what I was used to. "It's just for a year," my supervisor added, though I hadn't voiced any objection. "They've been having some issues with wildlife disturbances, possible poaching. The local rangers are stretched thin." I nodded, trying to appear enthusiastic. Truth was, I needed the change. After my divorce 2 years ago, I'd thrown myself into work, volunteering for the longest patrols, the most isolated posts. My colleagues noticed, of course, but they respected my need for solitude. This new assignment would give me plenty of that. 3 weeks later, I pulled my dusty pickup into the ranger station at Canyon de Chelly. The red sandstone formations towered around me, catching the late afternoon sun and blazing like fire. Despite my reservations, I felt a stirring of excitement. The landscape was magnificent, raw, and ancient in a way that made Yellowstone's geological features seem almost young by comparison. The station was small but well-maintained, a low adobe building with a metal roof. A lanky man in a ranger uniform stepped out as I parked, his expression cautious but welcoming. "Jack Parker?" he called. I climbed out of my truck, stretching after the long drive. "That's me." "Ben Sosi," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his dark eyes assessing me with unconcealed curiosity. "Welcome to Canyon de Chelly." Inside, the station was cool and dim. Maps covered one wall, along with a large aerial photograph of the canyon system. Ben poured us both coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing all day. "Sorry about the short notice," he said, leaning against a desk. "But we've been having some unusual activity in the North Canyon. The official report says wildlife disturbances, but it's more complicated than that." I took a sip of the bitter coffee, waiting for him to continue. "Livestock mutilations, mainly. Sheep and goats found with precise incisions, blood drained. Some hikers have gone missing, though we found most of them eventually, disoriented, claiming they saw something following them." Ben's voice was matter-of-fact, but I caught a hint of something else. Concern, maybe even fear. "Predators?" I suggested. "Mountain lions can—" "No," Ben cut me off. "We know mountain lions, coyotes, bears. This is different." He hesitated, then added, "Some of the local people are saying it's a skinwalker." I'd heard the term before, vaguely knew it referred to some kind of Navajo witch, but that was the extent of my knowledge. "I'm not familiar with the details of that legend." Ben's expression darkened. "It's not a legend to many people here. Skinwalkers are humans who've learned dark magic, gained the power to transform into animals. They're said to kill their own family members as part of their initiation. They bring sickness, death." He paused. "Most Navajo won't even talk about them for fear of attracting their attention." I kept my expression neutral, not wanting to offend Ben with my skepticism. "So what's our approach? Wildlife cameras, tracking?" "We've tried cameras," Ben said. "They malfunction or capture nothing. We've brought in trackers too, but the trails just disappear. Like whatever we're following just vanishes into thin air." He sighed. "Your housing is ready at Spider Rock. It's isolated, but it puts you close to where most of the activity has been reported. I'll be based here, about 30 minutes away by vehicle, longer on horseback." After finishing our coffee, Ben helped me unload my truck, then gave me directions to my new post. As I started the engine, he leaned in through the window. "One more thing," he said, his voice low. "The locals say if you hear your name called at night, don't answer. Not unless you've verified who's calling. Skinwalkers can mimic voices, lure you out into the dark." I nodded, trying not to show how ridiculous I found the warning. "Got it. No answering strange voices in the night." Ben didn't smile. "I'm serious, Parker. Whatever you believe, just be careful. This place has rules of its own. As I drove away, the sun was setting behind the canyon walls, casting long shadows across the ancient landscape. For the first time since accepting the assignment, I felt a trickle of unease slide down my spine. I dismissed it as nerves, fatigue from the long drive, perhaps even the power of suggestion after Ben's warnings. Yet as darkness fell completely and the stars emerged in brilliant clarity above the canyon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the deepening shadows. Something that knew I was coming and had been waiting for me to arrive. My cabin at Spider Rock was small but well equipped. A main room with a kitchenette, a separate bedroom, and a bathroom with surprisingly good water pressure. Solar panels provided electricity, though I was warned it could be unreliable during cloudy stretches. The isolation was perfect. From my front porch, I could see the towering spire of Spider Rock itself, a sandstone monolith rising 800 feet from the canyon floor. According to the information packet Ben had given me, Spider Rock was sacred to the Navajo, the home of Spider Woman who taught them how to weave. I wondered what other stories these ancient canyons held, what other entities might inhabit them in local belief. My first week passed uneventfully. I spent my days patrolling on horseback. Ben had assigned me a steady gelding named Dust, learning the terrain, introducing myself to the scattered residents, mostly Navajo families with sheep and goat herds. They were polite but reserved, especially when I mentioned the reports of livestock predation. "We don't talk about such things," an elderly woman told me as she continued weaving at her loom outside her hogan. "Words have power. Speaking of evil can invite it." I respected their reticence and changed the subject, asking instead about the history of the canyon, the safe trails, water sources. This they were willing to discuss, though I noticed how their eyes would occasionally drift to the shadows of the canyon walls, as if checking for unwelcome listeners. The first unusual incident occurred on my 8th night. I was sitting on my porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in spectacular reds and golds. As darkness fell, I remained outside, enjoying the emerging stars and the profound silence broken only by the occasional cry of a nightbird. Then I heard it, a soft scraping sound from the side of my cabin. I tensed, listening intently. It came again, like claws or fingernails dragging slowly against the wooden wall. Reaching for my flashlight, I stood and moved cautiously toward the sound. "Hello?" I called, mentally running through the possible wildlife culprits. A raccoon, maybe, or a ringtail cat. The scraping stopped immediately. I rounded the corner, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but found nothing. The side of the cabin was empty, the surrounding ground undisturbed. I examined the wooden siding and found 3 long parallel scratches that hadn't been there before, about 6 feet up from the ground. Too high for most wildlife unless it had somehow climbed the wall. I slept poorly that night, waking repeatedly to what sounded like footsteps circling my cabin. Each time I got up to investigate, I found nothing, though once I could have sworn I saw a pair of eyes reflecting my flashlight beam from the edge of the nearby junipers. Eyes set too high to belong to a coyote or fox. In the morning, I found tracks in the dusty soil around my cabin. Some were clearly coyote prints, but others were bizarre, almost like a coyote's paw but elongated, with impressions that looked disturbingly like human fingernails extending from the toe pads. I photographed them, then called Ben on the radio. He arrived 2 hours later, expression grim as he examined the tracks. "Have you seen anything like this before?" I asked. Ben nodded slowly. "Last spring, near White House Ruin, after a shepherd found 3 of his sheep with their throats cut. He knelt beside one of the strange prints. The medicine man who came to cleanse the area said these weren't made by any natural animal." I kept my face neutral. "What do you think made them?" Ben stood, brushing dust from his knees. "I think we need to set up surveillance, motion sensors, cameras, whatever this is, it's escalating its activities." We spent the rest of the day installing equipment, trail cameras at strategic points around my cabin and the nearby water source, motion-activated lights, even some simple alarms made of fishing line and tin cans along likely approach routes. Ben worked methodically, his expression focused, but I noticed how he kept glancing at the deepening shadows as afternoon wore on. You should come back to the main station tonight, he said finally as we finished testing the last camera. I shook my head. If this thing returns, I want to be here to see it. Ben frowned. Jack, these entities, they're drawn to isolation, to lone individuals. It's not safe. I'm armed, I reminded him, patting the sidearm at my hip. And we've got the place wired for sound and motion now. I'll be fine. He didn't look convinced but didn't argue further. As he prepared to leave, he handed me a small leather pouch on a cord. What's this? I asked, taking it. Protection, he said simply. My grandmother made it. Sage, cedar, and some other things. Keep it with you. I thanked him, slipping the cord around my neck to hide my discomfort. I didn't believe in magical protection, but I respected that Ben did. After he left, I made a simple dinner and settled in for the night, my shotgun within reach beside my bed. The cameras captured nothing that night, nor did the motion sensors trigger. But I woke at 3:17 a.m. I remember checking my watch, to the sound of my name being called from outside. Jack, the voice said so clearly it might have been right beside my bed. Jack, I need help. It was Ben's voice. Instantly alert, I grabbed my shotgun and flashlight and moved to the window. The motion lights outside were dark. Nothing had triggered them. Jack, came the voice again from the darkness beyond my porch. My horse fell. I think my leg is broken. My hand was on the door when I remembered Ben's warning from my first day. Don't answer if you hear your name called at night. I hesitated, then reached for my radio instead. Ben? I said into the handset. This is Jack. Do you copy? For a long moment, there was only static. Then Ben's voice came through, groggy with sleep. Jack, what's wrong? It's the middle of the night. A chill ran down my spine. Are you at the station? Of course I am, he replied, sounding more awake now. What's happening? Outside my cabin, the voice called again, still in perfect mimicry of Ben's tones, but somehow flatter, emptier of humanity. Jack, please, I'm bleeding badly. Someone's outside my cabin, I said into the radio, my voice barely above a whisper now. They're calling for help. Using your voice. Ben's response was immediate. Don't go out there. Whatever you do, stay inside until dawn. I'm on my way, but it'll take me at least 30 minutes. I switched on all the interior lights and positioned myself where I could watch both the front door and the windows. The voice continued calling for several minutes, growing increasingly desperate in its pleas. Then it changed tactics. Parker, it called, now in a voice I hadn't heard in years, my ex-wife's. Jack, I know you're in there. We need to talk. My blood ran cold. There was no way, no possible way anyone out here could know what Ellie sounded like. We'd been divorced for 2 years, and she'd never visited me at any of my ranger posts, not even when we were married. Jack, please, the voice continued, a perfect reproduction of Ellie's slightly husky tones. I made a mistake. I want to fix things between us. I remained frozen, listening as the voice cycled through a series of pleas and entreaties that played on my deepest regrets about my failed marriage. How could it know these things? How could it possibly know the exact words that would most tempt me to open that door? The motion light on my porch suddenly flared to life. Through the window, I could see a figure standing there, roughly human in shape but somehow wrong in its proportions. Its face was in shadow, but I could make out what looked like tattered clothing hanging from its thin frame. My radio crackled. Jack, I'm about 10 minutes out. Is it still there? I raised the radio slowly, not taking my eyes off the figure on my porch. Yes, it's right outside my front door. Can you describe it? Before I could answer, the figure moved, unnaturally fast, dropping to all fours with a fluid motion no human could replicate. It pressed its face against my window, and I found myself staring into eyes that reflected my indoor lights with an amber glow. The face around those eyes was wrong. part human, part animal with elongated jaws and patches of what looked like fur or feathers. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my shotgun. The thing at my window made a sound, a high, keening laugh that morphed into a coyote's yip, then back to a human chuckle. "It sees me," I whispered into the radio. The creature tilted its head, studying me with unnerving intelligence. Then it smiled, a terrible stretching of its misshapen mouth to reveal rows of sharp, uneven teeth. It raised one hand and pressed it against the glass. The fingers were too long, the nails curved into dark claws. I raised my shotgun, aiming directly at its face. "Get away from my window," I shouted. The creature's smile widened. It tapped one claw against the glass, then deliberately drew it downward, leaving a deep scratch in the pane. Then it turned and loped away into the darkness, moving with that same impossible speed and fluidity. The motion light revealed nothing but empty porch, then clicked off, plunging the area back into darkness. Ben found me sitting rigidly in the same spot when he arrived, my shotgun still trained on the window. The scratched glass was the only evidence that I hadn't imagined the entire encounter. "You saw it," he said quietly. Not a question. I nodded, finally lowering my weapon. "What the hell was that, Ben? What's out there?" He sank into a chair across from me, his face grave in the harsh interior lighting. "The people here have a name for it," he said, "but speaking that name might draw its attention." "It already has my attention," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to know what I'm dealing with." Ben was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke a single word, his voice barely audible even in the quiet cabin. "Yen Naldlushi, the skinwalker." Dawn broke across Canyon de Chelly in a spectacular display of color that felt obscenely beautiful after the night's events. Ben and I sat on my porch, watching the light transform the landscape while we drank strong coffee and discussed our options. "The traditional approach would be to bring in a medicine man," Ben explained, "perform a cleansing ceremony, strengthen the protective boundaries." I nodded, turning my coffee mug between my palms. "And the ranger approach?" Ben sighed. "That's more complicated. We have no protocol for this specific situation. Officially, we're investigating wildlife disturbances, possible poaching. That's what will go in our reports. But unofficially, we need to drive this thing out of the canyon before someone gets killed." Ben set his mug down with a decisive thunk. "The problem is skinwalkers are intelligent. They're human, or they were once. They know we're hunting them." I thought about those amber eyes staring at me through the window, the calculated malice in them. It knows who I am. It used voices from my past, things it couldn't possibly know. Ben nodded grimly. "They're said to have certain psychic abilities. They can sense vulnerabilities, extract information somehow. That's why they're so dangerous. They don't just hunt your body, they hunt your mind." We spent the morning reviewing the camera footage, which showed precisely nothing despite the creature's appearance on my porch. The motion sensors had triggered the lights, but the cameras had malfunctioned exactly when the entity appeared, showing only static. "That's consistent with previous attempts to document it," Ben said, unsurprised. "Electronic equipment fails around these beings." By midday, we had formulated a plan. Ben would return to the station to arrange for a medicine man to perform a cleansing ceremony at my cabin. In the meantime, I would investigate the locations of previous livestock mutilations and sightings, trying to establish a pattern. "Don't go out after dark," Ben warned as he prepared to leave, "and wear this at all times." He pointed to the protective pouch still hanging around my neck. I nodded, though privately I was struggling to accept that I was hunting what amounted to a supernatural predator. My ranger training hadn't covered witches who could transform into animals and read minds. After Ben left, I saddled Dust and rode out to the first location on our map, a small sheep camp where 3 animals had been found with precise incisions and drained of blood 2 months earlier. The elderly Navajo man who owned the sheep was reluctant to discuss the incidents, but he showed me where they'd been found, and after some gentle questioning admitted he'd seen something, watching his flock from the canyon rim the night before the attacks. Like a coyote but big, standing on two legs sometimes, he said, his weathered face impassive despite the strangeness of what he was describing. I fired my rifle, but it didn't run, just watched me. I respected their reticence and changed the subject, asking instead about the history of the canyon, the safe trails, water sources. This they were willing to discuss, though I noticed how their eyes would occasionally drift to the shadows of the canyon walls, as if checking for unwelcome listeners. The sun was getting low as I headed back to my cabin, casting long shadows across the trail. Dust seemed increasingly nervous, his ears flicking back and forth, his steps quickening without my urging. I felt it too, a growing sense that we were being watched from the dense junipers lining the path. We rounded a bend and Dust suddenly reared, nearly throwing me. Just ahead in the middle of the trail lay a dead sheep, its belly slit open from throat to groin. The wound was unnaturally precise, almost surgical, and there was almost no blood despite the massive trauma. I calmed Dust as best I could and dismounted, approaching the carcass cautiously. It was fresh. The eyes were clear, the body still warm to the touch. This kill was recent, within the last hour or so. A chill ran through me as I realized what that meant. The skinwalker was nearby, probably watching me right now. I drew my sidearm and scanned the surrounding vegetation. The late afternoon shadows were growing, creating too many places for something to hide. Dust snorted nervously, pulling at his reins. "Easy, boy," I murmured, though my own heart was racing. I needed to document this, then get back to my cabin before dark. I pulled out my phone and quickly photographed the carcass from multiple angles, noting the lack of blood, the precision of the wound. As I worked, a strange silence fell over the canyon. The birds stopped calling. The breeze seemed to die. Even the insects went quiet. All I could hear was Dust's anxious breathing and the blood pounding in my ears. Then I heard it, a soft rustling from the junipers to my right. I spun, gun raised, but saw nothing. "I know you're there," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Show yourself." Silence. Then a low chuckle that raised the hair on my arms. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Jack Parker," a voice whispered, not mimicking anyone this time, but eerily androgynous. "New ranger. New blood." I turned slowly, trying to locate the source. "Who are you? What do you want?" Another chuckle, closer now. "Want? I want what I always want. To feed, to hunt. This is my territory." "You're killing livestock," I said, playing for time as I edged back toward Dust. "That stops now." "The sheep are just practice," the voice replied, now seeming to come from directly behind me. I whirled, but there was nothing there. Dust was pulling frantically at his reins now, eyes rolling in terror. "What do you mean, practice?" I demanded. "For the real hunt," the voice whispered, now directly in my ear. "Humans. Like you." I spun again, firing instinctively into the empty air. The gunshot echoed through the canyon, startling a flock of ravens into flight from a distant pinnacle. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Then Dust screamed, a sound I'd never heard a horse make, pure terror given voice. He reared, breaking free of where I'd secured his reins, and bolted down the trail toward home. "Dust!" I shouted, but he was already gone, leaving me alone as the shadows lengthened. I started walking quickly in the direction Dust had fled, keeping my gun ready. The canyon walls loomed above me, seeming to bend inward as the light faded. It would be dark soon, and I was at least 3 miles from my cabin. A scrabbling sound on the rock face to my left made me freeze. Slowly, I raised my eyes to the canyon wall. Clinging to the sheer surface about 20 feet up was a figure that made my blood run cold. Humanoid but not human, with an elongated torso and limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its skin was a patchwork of what looked like animal pelts haphazardly stitched together. The head was the worst part, mostly coyote-like, but with human eyes sunken into the skull, watching me with naked hunger. It was the skinwalker, no longer hiding its true form. As I stared in horror, it smiled, revealing those same terrible teeth I'd seen through my window. Then it began to move downward toward me, its fingers and toes somehow finding purchase on the smooth sandstone. I fired again, the bullet chipping stone inches from the creature. It paused, tilting its head as if curious, then continued its descent. I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard a thud as it hit the ground, then the swift patter of footfalls in pursuit. It was fast, unnaturally so, and I knew I couldn't outrun it. I needed a defensive position. Ahead, the trail split. The left fork continued toward my cabin, while the right led to an ancient cliff dwelling I'd passed on my way out. The ruins were about half a mile away, built into a natural alcove in the canyon wall. They would offer some shelter, somewhere I could put my back to a wall and face whatever was hunting me. I veered right, sprinting now. The footfalls behind me quickened, gaining ground. I risked a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The skinwalker was loping after me on all fours, moving with a fluid grace that no quadruped should possess, its patchwork body rippling with unnatural strength. The ruins appeared ahead. White House, one of the best preserved cliff dwellings in the canyon. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning, and reached the start of the steep trail leading up to the alcove. Behind me, the skinwalker let out a sound between a laugh and a howl. I scrambled up the path, barely keeping my footing on the ancient stone steps. Reaching the dwelling, I ducked through the low doorway into what had once been the main living area. Stone walls surrounded me on three sides, with the open face of the alcove providing the only exit, the same way I'd entered. I positioned myself in a corner, gun trained on the doorway, trying to control my ragged breathing. For several long moments, nothing happened. No sound came from outside. No shadow darkened the doorway. Had it given up? Decided to wait me out? "You can't stay in there forever, Jack Parker," the voice called, once again seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Night is coming. My time." I checked my watch. Less than an hour until sunset. Even if Ben realized something was wrong when I didn't return, he wouldn't be able to reach me before dark. "What are you?" I called back, hoping to keep it talking, to learn something that might help me survive. A low chuckle. "I am the darkness between stars. I am the shadow that moves when you're not looking. I am hunger and terror given form." "You were human once," I said, remembering what Ben had told me. A hiss of displeasure. "A limited state. I transcended humanity long ago." "By killing your family," I said, "by performing evil rituals." "By embracing power," it corrected, "by shedding weakness, by becoming the predator instead of the prey." I could hear movement now, a light scraping across the stone outside. It was circling the dwelling, looking for another way in. "There are others hunting you," I said. "The Navajo know what you are. They'll send medicine men." A sound that might have been a scoff. "Old men with herbs and chants. They can stop me. No one can. This canyon has been mine for centuries." Centuries? How old was this thing? "Your kind aren't immortal," I said, hoping to provoke it into revealing more information. "You can be killed." Silence. Then, so close it made me jump, a whisper from just outside the doorway. "So can you." A shape filled the entrance, not the patchwork monstrosity I'd seen on the canyon wall, but a man. Ordinary, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, his face in shadow against the fading daylight behind him. "Ben?" I called uncertainly, though something in me knew this wasn't my fellow ranger. The figure stepped forward, and I saw its face clearly for the first time. It was me. My face, my build, even wearing clothes identical to mine. The only difference was the eyes, still that inhuman amber, watching me with malicious amusement. "What's wrong, Jack?" it asked in my voice. "Don't you recognize yourself?" I fired. The bullet struck it squarely in the chest, but it didn't flinch, didn't bleed. It looked down at the hole in its shirt, then back at me, grinning with too many teeth. "My turn," it said. I blinked, and it was on me. I had no time to fire again before it slammed into me with impossible force, sending us both crashing into the stone wall behind me. My gun went flying, skittering across the ancient floor and disappearing into a dark corner. Its hands, now elongated into claws, pinned my shoulders against the wall. Its face, my face, inches from mine, that terrible grin stretching wider than any human mouth could. "I'm going to wear your skin, Ranger," it whispered, its breath hot and foul against my face. "Walk among your kind. Feed on them from within." I struggled, but its strength was inhuman. One clawed hand moved to my throat, pressing just hard enough to restrict my breathing without crushing my windpipe. "But first," it continued, "I'll feed on your fear, your memories, your soul." Its amber eyes began to glow, pupils expanding until they consumed the irises entirely. Looking into them was like staring into an abyss, a void that pulled at something inside me. I felt a pressure in my mind, an invasive presence sifting through my thoughts and memories. Images flashed before me, my childhood, my failed marriage, my isolation in the years since. The creature was extracting my experiences, feeding on them somehow. "So much loneliness," it murmured, its voice taking on a dreamy quality. "So much regret. Delicious." The pressure in my head intensified, becoming painful. I tried to look away from those eyes, but I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. The creature had me in some kind of trance. "Your ex-wife," it continued, sounding almost conversational now. "She left because you were never really there, even when you were physically present, always distant, always hiding in your work, in the wilderness." Pain shot through my skull as it dug deeper. "And before her, your mother, died while you were away at college. You didn't make it home in time to say goodbye. Still blame yourself for that, don't you?" How could it know these things? These weren't just facts it could have gleaned from observation or research. These were my deepest regrets, my most private pain. "Stop," I managed to gasp, but it only tightened its grip on my throat. "I'm going to consume every part of you," it whispered. "Your body, your memories, your identity. By the time I'm done, there won't be anything left of Jack Parker except what I choose to mimic." The pain in my head reached a crescendo, and I heard myself scream, though no sound passed my lips. This was it. I was going to die here, my consciousness devoured by this ancient evil. My body just another empty vessel for it to wear until discarded. My hand brushed against something at my neck. Ben's protective pouch, still hanging from its cord. In desperation, I clutched it, feeling the small objects inside press against my palm. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The creature recoiled as if burned, its grip on my throat loosening enough for me to gasp a full breath. Its eyes flickered, the glow dimming momentarily. "What is that?" it hissed, its face, my face, contorting in pain or anger. I didn't answer, just clutched the pouch tighter, focusing on it like a lifeline. The creature lunged at me again but seemed unable to touch the hand holding the medicine bag. It snarled in frustration, its form rippling and changing, shedding my appearance and reverting to the patchwork monstrosity. "That won't protect you for long," it growled, circling me now. "The old ways are fading. Their power diminishes with each generation that forgets." I backed away, keeping the pouch between us, searching desperately for my gun in the growing darkness. The sun had nearly set, and the interior of the cliff dwelling was filling with shadows that seemed to move and pulse around the skinwalker, as if drawn to it. "Ben knows where I am," I said, hoping it was true. "He'll come looking when I don't return." The creature laughed, a horrible sound that echoed through the ancient dwelling. "Your friend can't save you. No one can. You entered my hunting grounds of your own free will. You pursued me. Now you pay the price." It lunged again, faster than I could track, coming at me from the side. Claws raked across my ribs, tearing through my shirt and into flesh. I cried out, stumbling backward, warm blood soaking my side. The skinwalker paused, raising its bloodied claws to its face. It inhaled deeply, then licked my blood from one talon, its eyes rolling back in apparent ecstasy. "Delicious," it murmured. "Your fear makes your blood sweet." It started toward me again, but froze at a new sound, a voice from outside calling my name. "Jack! Jack, are you in there?" "Ben." It was really him this time. I could hear the concern in his voice, the slightly different cadence from the skinwalker's mimicry. The creature snarled, looking between me and the doorway. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in those inhuman eyes. "Jack!" Ben called again, closer now. "In here!" I shouted back, never taking my eyes off the skinwalker. "Ben, be careful. It's here." The creature made a decision, darting not toward the door but toward the back of the dwelling, where centuries of erosion had created a small gap between the built structure and the natural alcove. It slipped through like smoke, impossibly fluid, and was gone just as Ben appeared in the doorway, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Jack, are you all right?" He rushed to my side, taking in my bloodied shirt, the claw marks visible through the torn fabric. "It was here," I gasped, the pain in my side intensifying now that the immediate danger had passed. "The skinwalker. It looked like me, Ben. It was wearing my face." Ben's expression darkened. "That's what they do. Take forms that will get them close to their prey." He examined my wound. "These need cleaning. Can you walk?" I nodded, though I felt lightheaded from blood loss and the psychic assault. "How did you find me?" "Dust came back to your cabin without you. I knew something was wrong." Ben helped me to my feet. "I brought horses. We need to get you back before full dark." As we made our way carefully down from the cliff dwelling, I felt eyes on us from the shadows above. Looking up, I caught a glimpse of movement along the rim of the alcove, a silhouette briefly visible against the darkening sky, watching our departure. "It's still there," I murmured to Ben. He nodded grimly. "It won't give up easily. You're marked now. It's tasted your blood, touched your mind. It will come for you again." "What do we do?" Ben helped me onto his second horse, then mounted his own. "We fight back. The medicine man will be at your cabin tomorrow. Tonight we ward the doors and windows, keep watch." As we rode back through the gathering darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Occasionally, from the corner of my eye, I would catch glimpses of movement pacing us from the shadows of the canyon walls. A flicker of amber eyes, the suggestion of a loping figure. The skinwalker was escorting us home, ensuring it knew exactly where to find me later. Back at my cabin, Ben helped me clean and bandage my wounds. 3 deep gashes across my ribs that would leave permanent scars but hadn't hit anything vital. He brewed a bitter tea from herbs he'd brought, insisting I drink it all. "It will help protect your mind," he explained. "The skinwalker has touched your thoughts. It created a connection it can use to influence you, to know where you are." I drank the tea without argument, too exhausted and shaken to question Ben's methods. As the night deepened around my small cabin, we took turns keeping watch. During my shifts, I would occasionally hear scratching at the walls, soft footfalls on the porch, even my own voice calling from the darkness, taunting me. But the creature didn't show itself, didn't try to break in. It was playing with me, I realized, building fear, making me anticipate what would come next. During Ben's watch, I fell into a fitful sleep plagued by nightmares. In them, I was running through the canyon, pursued by a shadow that kept changing form, sometimes the patchwork monster, sometimes myself, sometimes people from my past. When it caught me, it would peel back its face like a mask, revealing a void beneath, a nothingness that began to consume me. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, to find Ben shaking my shoulder. "You were screaming," he said, his face grave in the dim light of dawn. "What did you see?" I described the nightmare, watching Ben's expression grow increasingly concerned. "It's trying to weaken you through your dreams," he said. "The tea should have prevented that. This skinwalker is powerful, more so than any I've encountered before." "You've faced others?" I asked, surprised. Ben's gaze dropped. Once, years ago, it didn't end well. Before I could ask for details, he stood. The medicine man will be here soon. His name is Thomas Begay. He's very traditional, very respected. If anyone can help us, it's him. Thomas arrived as the morning sun cleared the canyon rim, an elderly man with a deeply lined face and alert black eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He carried a worn leather bag and walked with the aid of a gnarled juniper staff, though he moved with surprising agility for his age. Ben greeted him with deference, speaking in Navajo. Thomas nodded, then turned those penetrating eyes on me. "You have seen the Yi-Nald-Lushi," he said, his English accented but clear. "It has marked you." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Show me where it touched you." I lifted my shirt, revealing the bandaged claw marks. Thomas moved closer, not touching the wounds but holding his hand just above them, his eyes closing in concentration. After a moment, he spoke again. "This is old evil. Very old. It has fed on fear and death for many generations." "Can you stop it?" I asked. Thomas lowered his hand, his expression grave. "I cannot destroy it. Such evil must be faced by the one it hunts. But I can strengthen you for the battle, cleanse your spirit, break the connection it has forged with your mind." He instructed Ben and me to prepare the cabin while he gathered materials outside. We moved furniture, creating a space in the center of the main room, and collected the items he requested: a bowl of clean water, a small mirror, a candle. When Thomas returned, he carried bundles of herbs and a small bag of what looked like colored sand. Without explanation, he began the ceremony, speaking in Navajo as he created elaborate designs on the floor with the sand, lit bundles of herbs that filled the cabin with pungent smoke, and guided me to sit within the central pattern he'd created. The ritual lasted hours, the words and actions mysterious to me but performed with such conviction that I found myself believing in their power. Thomas chanted, sprinkled water that had been mixed with herbs on my wounds, passed smoke over my body, and at one point placed his hands on my head, speaking words that seemed to vibrate through my entire being. As the ceremony progressed, I felt something changing within me, a lightening, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying was being lifted. The constant sense of being watched, of alien thoughts brushing against mine, gradually faded. Finally, Thomas stepped back, looking exhausted but satisfied. "The connection is broken," he said. "For now. But you must still face it. Defeat it, or it will never stop hunting you." "How do I defeat something like that?" I asked. "My bullets didn't even slow it down." Thomas reached into his bag and withdrew a small knife with a bone handle, its blade darkened with age. "This blade was made by my great-grandfather. The metal was mixed with white ash and blessed by 7 medicine men. It can harm the skinwalker, perhaps even kill it if you strike its heart." He handed me the knife, which felt warm in my palm, almost alive. "But remember, weapons alone are not enough. The skinwalker feeds on fear, on doubt, on the darkness within us all. To defeat it, you must face your own darkness first." I looked at the ancient blade, then back at Thomas. "I don't understand." "You will," he said simply, "when the time comes." After Thomas left, Ben and I discussed our next move. The protective ceremony had given us some breathing room, but we both knew the skinwalker wouldn't give up its hunt. "We need to take the fight to it," I said. "Find its lair." Ben nodded slowly. "Based on the sightings and attacks, it's likely somewhere in Black Rock Canyon. But Jack, no one goes there. Even the most experienced Navajo guides avoid it. There are stories." "What kind of stories?" "Ancient burial sites, doorways to other worlds, places where the boundaries between realms are thin." Ben looked uncomfortable. "The old ones say Black Rock was a place of power long before the Navajo came to these lands, a place where skinwalkers and other dark beings gathered." I thought about what Thomas had said, that I would need to face my own darkness to defeat the creature. Whatever that meant, I couldn't do it hiding in my cabin. We go to Black Rock tomorrow, I decided. Find this thing's lair and end this. Ben didn't look happy, but he agreed. We'll leave at first light. Together. That night, for the first time since my encounter, I slept without nightmares. Whatever Thomas had done had indeed broken the skinwalker's psychic grip on me. But as dawn approached, I woke to a whisper that seemed to come from inside my own head. I'm waiting for you, Jack Parker. Come find me. The hunt was about to begin, but who was truly the hunter, and who the hunted, remained to be seen. Black Rock Canyon lived up to its ominous name. Unlike the golden sandstone of the main canyon system, the rock here was dark, almost black in places, streaked with minerals that glinted in the morning light. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 horses to ride abreast, and the air inside felt different, heavier, charged with some indefinable energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. Ben and I rode in silence, alert for any sign of the skinwalker or its lair. The walls rose sharply on either side, creating deep shadows despite the clear sky above. Our horses were nervous, ears constantly flicking, nostrils flared. No one comes here? I asked quietly, breaking the oppressive silence. Ben shook his head. Only those who don't know better. Tourists sometimes, but they don't stay long. The place has a way of encouraging people to leave. I could feel it. A subtle pressure, a wrongness that intensified the deeper we rode into the canyon. If I were here alone, I might have turned back, attributing the sensation to nerves or imagination. But seeing Ben's tension, the way his eyes constantly scanned the shadows, confirmed that the feeling was real. About 2 miles in, the canyon widened into a roughly circular area about 100 yards across. At its center stood a formation unlike anything I'd seen in the region, a spire of black rock that twisted upward like a frozen flame, its surface oddly smooth compared to the weathered walls surrounding it. "What is that?" I asked, raining dust to a stop. Ben halted beside me, his expression grim. "The old ones call it the Witch's Spire. They say it's where the first skinwalkers performed their rituals, where they transformed from human to something else." We dismounted, securing the horses to a stunted juniper. Neither animal seemed happy to be left, but they couldn't accompany us further. The ground ahead was too broken, too steep. Armed with my service weapon, Thomas's knife securely sheathed at my belt, we approached the spire cautiously. As we drew closer, I could see that the smooth surface was covered in faint markings, petroglyphs of a sort, but unlike the familiar Navajo rock art I'd seen elsewhere in the canyon. These depicted elongated, distorted figures, neither fully human nor animal, engaged in what appeared to be hunting or ritual scenes. "These aren't Navajo," Ben confirmed, tracing one figure with his fingertip. "Much older. No one knows who carved them." At the base of the spire, we found what we were looking for, an opening, a narrow crevice that widened into what appeared to be a cave extending deep into the rock. The entrance was partially hidden behind a boulder, discoverable only if you were specifically searching for it. Ben and I exchanged glances. "This has to be it," I said quietly. He nodded, then reached into his pack and handed me a flashlight. "I'll go first." "No," I replied firmly. "The skinwalker marked me, not you. This is my fight." Ben looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. "I'll be right behind you." I drew my weapon, switched on the flashlight, and entered the crevice. The passage was tight at first, forcing me to turn sideways to squeeze through. Then it opened suddenly into a larger space, a cave with a ceiling high enough to stand comfortably. My flashlight beam revealed ancient artwork covering the walls, more of the strange, elongated figures, but rendered in pigments that somehow remained vivid despite their obvious age. The floor was smooth, worn by countless footsteps, over what must have been centuries of use. "This place is old," Ben whispered behind me. "Very old." We moved deeper into the cave system, the passage twisting downward. The air grew cooler, damper, with an underlying scent I couldn't place. Something organic but wrong, like meat left too long in the sun. The passage branched. Without discussion, we took the left fork, which continued to descend. The walls here were closer, the ceiling lower, forcing us to crouch. The artwork changed too, becoming more disturbing. Scenes of transformed beings hunting humans, of rituals involving dismembered bodies. The passage opened again into another chamber, larger than the first. My flashlight beam caught what appeared to be an altar of sorts, a flat stone slab positioned in the center of the room, its surface stained dark with what could only be ancient blood. But what truly chilled me were the items arranged around the chamber. Modern things. A backpack with a German tourism logo, a child's shoe, a camera, a wallet lying open, driver's license still visible in its clear plastic window. Trophies, Ben breathed. From its victims. I moved closer to the wallet, angling my light to read the license. The face that stared back was young, maybe early 20s, a hiker who'd gone missing from the canyon 2 years earlier. The official report had concluded he'd likely fallen from a cliff, his body washed away by seasonal floods. He never left, I said quietly. A sound from deeper in the cave system made us both freeze. A soft scraping like claws on stone. We extinguished our lights immediately, plunging the chamber into absolute darkness. For several long moments we stood motionless, barely breathing. Then came a voice echoing from the passages beyond. "I can smell you, Jack Parker. You and your friend. You've come to my home. How hospitable." The skinwalker. It knew we were here. "We should fall back," Ben whispered, so quietly I barely heard him. Regroup. But retreat meant being caught in the narrow passages, hunted from behind. At least here, in the chamber, we had room to maneuver. "No," I whispered back. "This ends here." I felt Ben press something into my hand. A small bundle wrapped in leather. "Dust this across the entrance to the next passage," he instructed. "It will slow it down." I didn't ask what it was, just moved silently to the dark opening that led deeper into the cave system. I could hear movement now coming closer, a rhythmic sound, like something moving on 4 legs, then 2, then 4 again. Carefully, I unwrapped the bundle, finding a fine powder inside. I scattered it across the threshold of the passage as Ben had instructed, then backed away, drawing Thomas's knife with my left hand, keeping my gun in my right. "Clever," the skinwalker's voice called, closer now. "Using the old protections, but they won't save you." A pause, then. "Do you want to know what happened to the boy whose wallet you found? He screamed for his mother when I wore his skin. Piece by piece. He was still alive when I reached his face. I felt sick but kept my position, waiting. The creature was trying to provoke us, to make us break cover or flee in terror. So many have come to my canyon over the centuries," it continued conversationally. "The Anasazi first, then Navajo. Now tourists with their cameras and water bottles. All of them, eventually, food." A new sound echoed through the chamber. A low, rhythmic chanting in a language I didn't recognize. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from Ben, who had positioned himself on the opposite side of the room. "Ah," the skinwalker hissed. "The ranger knows the old words, but does he know them well enough?" The chanting grew louder, and I felt a shift in the air, a thickening of the darkness. Ben had drawn something from his pocket, a small object that glowed faintly with an inner light. The skinwalker shrieked, a sound of rage or pain that echoed deafeningly in the confined space. Then came a rush of movement from the inner passage. I raised my gun, aiming at the threshold where I'd scattered the powder. A shape burst through, not the patchwork monstrosity I expected, but a swarm of creatures like bats but larger, with distorted, almost human faces. They filled the chamber, circling frantically, their wings creating a cacophony that nearly drowned out Ben's continued chanting. "Don't let them touch you," Ben shouted over the noise. I fired at the nearest cluster, hitting several, They didn't bleed or fall. They simply dissipated into smoke that rejoined the swarm. "They're not real," I called back. "Just distractions." As if confirming my words, the swarm suddenly converged into a single form, the skinwalker in its true aspect, that horrible patchwork of animal pelts and twisted limbs. It stood at the entrance to the inner passage, blocked from fully entering by the powder I'd scattered, but its amber eyes fixed on me with malevolent intelligence. "You cannot defeat me here in my place of power," it said, its voice no longer human but a guttural growl. "I have fed on fear for centuries. Yours is particularly sweet, Jack Parker. So much doubt, so much regret, so much darkness inside you." It raised a clawed hand, pointing directly at my chest. "I see it all. The emptiness you try to fill with wilderness and isolation. The fear of connection that drove away everyone who ever loved you. The small secret part of you that wonders if you deserve to be alone." Each word struck like a physical blow, resonating with truths I'd tried to bury. How could it know these things? Thomas's ceremony was supposed to have broken its connection to my mind. "The connection goes both ways," it said, answering my unspoken question. "I touched your thoughts. You touched mine. We are linked now, you and I, forever." Ben's chanting reached a crescendo, and the glowing object in his hand flared brightly. The skinwalker hissed, recoiling from the light. "Now, Jack!" Ben shouted. "While it's weakened!" I raised my gun, but the skinwalker laughed, a horrible gurgling sound. "Your weapons cannot harm me. I am beyond such things." "Maybe not all weapons," I replied, holstering my gun and drawing Thomas's knife. The blade seemed to vibrate in my hand, responding to the creature's presence. The skinwalker's eyes fixed on the knife, and for the first time, I saw something like fear in those amber depths. "Where did you get that?" it demanded. "From someone who knows how to kill your kind," I answered, stepping forward. The creature snarled, pressing against the invisible barrier created by Ben's powder. "You would have to reach me first, Ranger. And to do that, you must cross my threshold, enter my domain willingly. Are you prepared for what awaits you there?" I hesitated. There was something about the way it spoke, a trap in its words. "Don't do it, Jack," Ben warned, still holding the glowing object high. "If you cross that threshold of your own free will, you'll be in its power." The skinwalker smiled, that terrible stretching of its misshapen mouth. "Listen to your friend. Run away. Live in fear, knowing I will always be hunting you, always be waiting in the shadows. Or cross over, face me, end this, one way or another." I looked at the knife in my hand, then at the monster before me. Thomas's words echoed in my mind. "To defeat it, you must face your own darkness first." I understood now what he meant. The skinwalker fed on fear, on doubt, on the darkness within us. It had sensed mine, used it against me. To defeat it, I needed to confront those shadows, accept them as part of myself rather than hiding from them. "If I cross," I said slowly, "it's not because you've lured me. It's my choice." The creature's smile widened. "Then choose, Jack Parker. Now." I took a deep breath, centered myself, and stepped forward, deliberately crossing the line of powder. Immediately I felt a change, a heaviness, as if the air itself had thickened. Ben's voice seemed distant now. The glow of his protective object dimmed. The skinwalker and I faced each other across a few feet of ancient stone. Up close, its form was even more horrific. Patches of fur, scales, and what looked like human skin stitched together with sinew. Its limbs jointed in too many places, its face a nightmare collage of animal features with those all-too-human eyes. "Now we are alone," it said, its voice reverberating in my head rather than in the air between us. Truly alone. The cave around us seemed to fade, replaced by shifting shadows that formed and reformed into scenes from my past. My mother's hospital room, empty when I finally arrived. My ex-wife's face as she told me she couldn't live with my emotional absence anymore. The endless, empty trails I'd walked alone. "This is who you are," the skinwalker said, gesturing to the images. "A man who runs from connection, who hides in wilderness because people are too difficult, too demanding, who pretends his isolation is noble rather than cowardice." Each word hit like a physical blow because each contained a kernel of truth. I had run. I had hidden. I had chosen paths that led away from potential pain, potential loss. "Yes," I acknowledged, and saw surprise flicker in those amber eyes. "There is darkness in me, fear, doubt, regret. I've made choices I'm not proud of. I've hurt people by holding them at a distance." The skinwalker tilted its head, studying me. "Then why fight me? We are not so different, you and I. We both chose isolation, power, control." "No," I said firmly. "That's where we differ. I recognize my darkness. I don't feed it. I don't let it consume me or others." I raised Thomas's knife. "And I choose now to step into the light." The skinwalker snarled, lunging forward with that unnatural speed. But something had changed. I could track its movements now, could see the pattern in its attack. I sidestepped, the knife flashing out to score a line across its patchwork hide. The creature shrieked, a sound of genuine pain. Where the blade had touched, its flesh smoked and blackened, the wound refusing to close. "Impossible," it hissed, circling me warily now. "Not impossible," I replied. "Inevitable. Darkness always gives way to light eventually." It attacked again, claws extended toward my throat. I ducked beneath the strike, driving the knife upward into its chest. The blade sank deep, meeting resistance for only a moment before sliding home. The skinwalker froze, its amber eyes wide with shock or disbelief. It looked down at the knife buried to the hilt in its chest, then back at me. "Centuries," it whispered. "I have fed for centuries." "Not anymore," I said quietly. The creature's form began to change, the patchwork hide peeling away like old wallpaper, revealing glimpses of what lay beneath, not flesh or bone, but a swirling darkness, a void that seemed to collapse in upon itself. The amber eyes were the last to go, fixing me with a final look of hatred before they too dissolved into nothingness. The knife clattered to the stone floor, its blade clean as if it had never pierced anything at all. The shadowy visions faded, the cave solidifying around me once more. Ben stood where I'd left him, the glowing object now dark in his hand, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "Jack, are you all right?" I nodded slowly, bending to retrieve the knife. "It's over. The skinwalker is gone." Ben looked at the empty space where the creature had been. "I've never seen... How did you defeat it?" I slipped the knife back into its sheath, by accepting that darkness exists within all of us, by choosing not to let it define me. We made our way back through the cave system, gathering evidence of the missing hikers to provide closure to their families. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, the air clearer somehow, as if a miasma that had hung over the place for centuries had finally dissipated. Outside, the canyon seemed different too, still ancient and powerful, but no longer threatening. The horses greeted us calmly, showing none of their earlier nervousness. As we rode back toward the main canyon, Ben finally asked the question I'd been expecting. "Will you stay, now that it's over?" I considered the question, looking at the magnificent landscape around us. "For a while," I decided. "There's more to learn here, more to understand, and more to heal," though I didn't say this aloud. The skinwalker was gone, but its words had struck home. I had used isolation as a shield, wilderness as an excuse to avoid the messiness of human connection. Perhaps it was time to change that pattern, to step out of the shadows in more ways than one. That night, as I sat on my porch watching the stars emerge above Canyon de Chelly, I felt a presence. Not malevolent this time, but watchful, protective. Thomas had explained that the canyon was home to many spirits, not all of them dark. The balance has been restored, he'd said when we reported our success. But remember, Ranger, where there is light, there will always be shadow. That is the nature of the world. I touched the knife at my belt, now my responsibility to safeguard. The skinwalker was gone, but others existed. Other dangers lurked in remote places where ancient powers still held sway. But for now, the night was peaceful. The canyon quiet except for the distant cry of a coyote, a natural coyote, hunting under the desert moon. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in the wilderness. I felt connected to this land, to its history, and to the people who called it home. The darkness had not been defeated forever. Such victories are never permanent. But it had been pushed back, its hold broken. And in that space, something new could grow. Something perhaps like hope. The summer of 1994 marked my third season as a ranger at Arches National Park in southeastern Utah. Back then, I was Ricky Kincaid, badge number 47, stationed at one of America's most striking landscapes, a place where erosion had carved impossible formations from salmon-colored sandstone over millions of years. I'd escaped a claustrophobic upbringing in St. Louis, trading concrete for open skies and the quiet isolation that seemed, at first, like paradise. My cabin sat on the edge of park property, a modest structure with thin walls that creaked at night when the desert winds picked up. The posting was supposed to be straightforward, patrolling trails, guiding tourists, ensuring campers followed fire regulations, and occasionally rescuing the odd hiker who underestimated the brutal summer heat. The pay wasn't remarkable, but I considered the vast landscape my real compensation. Each morning began the same way. I'd rise before dawn, force down a piece of dry toast, and step outside to watch the sun paint the distant formations. The sandstone would gradually transform from shadowy silhouettes to brilliant orange-red monuments as first light broke over the horizon. The scent of sage and dust would fill my lungs, a perfume I came to associate with freedom. "Another scorcher coming," Carl Jennings would often say when our morning shifts overlapped. Carl was a veteran ranger, approaching 60 with leathery skin and a thick gray mustache that seemed specifically designed for his habit of quoting old westerns. He'd been working the park for nearly 20 years and knew every crevice and hollow. "The Europeans are already at Devil's Garden," he told me one particularly hot July morning. 2 buses, German tour group. They're always the early birds. I adjusted my straw hat, a deviation from standard uniform that my supervisor tolerated. When visitors asked about it, I'd joke that it let my head breathe better than the issued cap. The truth was, it reminded me of my grandfather, who'd worn something similar while tending his small vegetable garden back in Missouri. "I'll head up to Landscape Arch," I offered. "Make sure they're staying on trail." Carl nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly as he scanned the horizon. "Been finding some strange things lately," he mentioned casually, though something in his tone made me pause. "Might be nothing." "What kind of strange things?" He shrugged. "Tracks that don't match up with what we know is out here. Couple of folks from the RV park outside the boundary reported their dogs went missing. Never came back." I wasn't particularly concerned. The desert was unforgiving, and pets that wandered off rarely survived long in the harsh conditions. Coyotes, dehydration, or simply getting lost in the labyrinthine landscape claimed many animals that strayed too far. "Probably coyotes," I suggested. Carl rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Maybe. But Jenkins, runs that little store at the crossroads. He said his German Shepherd disappeared. That's a big dog for a coyote to take down." We parted ways shortly after, Carl heading toward the visitor center, while I took my truck up to Devil's Garden trailhead. The morning proceeded normally. I checked permits, reminded hikers to carry sufficient water, and picked up the occasional discarded wrapper. By midday, the heat had become oppressive. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the red rocks radiated warmth like giant heating elements. I sought refuge in a small patch of shade beneath an overhang, sipping from my canteen and watching a raven soar on thermal currents overhead. That's when I noticed the smell, a putrid odor that seemed wildly out of place in the clean desert air. It reminded me of roadkill baking on asphalt, but more intense. Following my nose, I discovered the source in a narrow crevice beneath the overhang. A jackrabbit lay splayed in an unnatural position, its neck twisted nearly backward. What caught my attention weren't just the strange wounds that riddled its small body, but the way it had been placed, deliberately arranged with its limbs extended almost in a ceremonial fashion. No predator I knew would position its kill this way. Even more puzzling, the location made little sense. The crevice was about 5 feet off the ground, in a smooth rock face that would be difficult for most desert predators to access. I took photos for the wildlife management team and removed the carcass, burying it away from the trail. That evening, during our staff meeting in the ranger station, I mentioned my discovery to the assembled team. Probably just some sicko tourist, suggested Felix Navarro, our newest hire. He was young, maybe 25, with an enthusiastic approach to visitor relations that sometimes bordered on theatrical. On a 5-foot-high ledge? I questioned. Margaret Wilkins, a volunteer who helped maintain trails, cleared her throat. I found something similar near Tower Arch yesterday. A desert fox, arranged strangely. Her voice wavered slightly. Its eyes were gone. Could be ravens, offered our supervisor, Dale Hutchinson. They'll take eyes first. This wasn't scavenging, Margaret insisted, her fingers nervously twisting the ends of her gray-streaked braid. It was deliberate. Carl remained quiet throughout this exchange, but I noticed him watching Margaret with an intensity that seemed out of character. When the meeting concluded, he caught my arm as I headed for the door. Tower Arch, he murmured. I found tracks there last week. Big as my hand, deep in the sand. Don't look like cougar. Don't look like coyote. Maybe a mountain lion with a twisted paw. He tried to laugh it off, but I could see worry etched in the creases around his eyes. That night in my cabin, I left the windows open to catch any stray breeze. The heat lingered well after sunset, making sleep difficult. Around 2 a.m. I jolted awake to a sound just outside, a slow, deliberate scraping like nails dragging across the wooden exterior. Heart pounding, I reached for the flashlight I kept beside my bed. The beam revealed nothing when I shined it through the window screens, just the familiar silhouettes of junipers and the vast, star-speckled sky beyond. Yet as I settled back into bed, the hair on my arms refused to lie flat, and sleep remained elusive until dawn painted the horizon. I told myself it was just a branch moved by the wind, or perhaps a curious nocturnal animal investigating my cabin. But deep down, something whispered that the perfect solitude of Arches was being disturbed by a presence that didn't belong among the red rocks and ancient formations. Something that was watching, waiting, and slowly making its presence known. The next week brought an unusual influx of visitors escaping a heat wave that had settled over much of the Southwest. The parking lots overflowed, and our modest ranger station buzzed with constant activity. Amid the chaos, the strange discoveries continued. A family from Seattle reported finding a collection of small animal bones arranged in a circular pattern beneath Double Arch. A pair of backpackers from Vermont stumbled upon another carcass, this time a mule deer with its neck twisted at a disturbing angle, lying in a crevice below a rock overhang. The blood had dried to a dark stain in the sandstone dust. "This is getting ridiculous," Dale said during our emergency staff meeting. "The Park Service doesn't need this kind of publicity. If we've got some deranged person leaving these displays, I want them found." We increased patrols, particularly in the remote sections where visitors rarely ventured. Carl and I volunteered to check the backcountry areas near the fiery furnace, a labyrinthine collection of narrow sandstone corridors where it was easy to get lost without a guide. The July heat pressed down like a physical weight as we hiked, the air shimmering above the red rocks. We moved in silence for the most part, our boots crunching on the sandy trail, each lost in thought. "You been sleeping okay?" Carl asked suddenly, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead with a bandana. The question caught me off guard. "Well enough." "Why?" He shrugged, his gaze fixed on the distant formations. "Been hearing things at night, around my place." "What kind of things?" "Scratching, movement. Thought it might be raccoons at first, but..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "Never mind. Probably just getting paranoid in my old age." We continued our patrol, finding nothing unusual until we reached a secluded area behind a massive fin of sandstone. There, in the shade, we discovered fresh tracks. Definitely not human, but unlike any animal print I recognized. They were deeply pressed into the sand, with what appeared to be 4 elongated toes and a strange backward-facing heel. "These the ones you mentioned before?" I asked, crouching to examine them more closely. Carl nodded grimly. "Bigger than last time?" I placed my hand beside one imprint for scale. It was nearly twice the size of my splayed fingers. "Mountain lion wouldn't leave tracks like this." "No," Carl agreed quietly. "It wouldn't." We took photographs and measurements before continuing, but the discovery left a cold knot in my stomach that even the desert heat couldn't warm. That evening, Margaret approached me as I filed my report. Her usually calm demeanor seemed shaken, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a water bottle. "I'm leaving," she announced without preamble. "Heading out tomorrow morning." "Your volunteer term isn't up for another month," I reminded her, surprised by the sudden decision. She looked over her shoulder as if expecting someone to be listening, then leaned closer. "I found something today," she whispered, "near Broken Arch. Something wrong. I can't stay here anymore, Ricky." "What did you find?" I pressed, but she shook her head vehemently. "Just heed my warning. Be careful out there, especially at night." With that cryptic statement, she turned and walked away, leaving me puzzled and increasingly uneasy. The next morning, Margaret was gone. She'd left a brief note pinned to the staff bulletin board citing health concerns and thanking everyone for the experience. Her hasty departure became the main topic of conversation during breakfast at the ranger station. "Did she say anything to you?" Felix asked me, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Just that she found something that scared her," I admitted. Felix lowered his voice. "You know what's weird? I was checking the register last night. 3 campers who signed in 4 days ago never signed out." "People forget to sign out all the time," I said, though the information added to my growing discomfort. "Yeah, but their rental car is still in the visitor center lot. Been there since Tuesday." Our conversation was interrupted by Dale, who burst into the break room looking harried. "We've got a situation," he announced. "Those 3 campers Felix mentioned, the Colorado boys, their families have reported them missing. They were supposed to check in back home yesterday. A search party was hastily organized. Carl and I, along with Felix and 2 seasonal rangers, were assigned to check the area around Broken Arch where the young men had indicated they planned to camp. The summer sun beat down mercilessly as we hiked the sandy trail, our radios crackling occasionally with updates from other search teams. We found their campsite shortly after noon. The tent was half collapsed as if abandoned in haste. Inside, sleeping bags remained unrolled, and backpacks sat with contents partially spilled. A small camp stove had toppled over, spilling freeze-dried meal packets across the ground. "No blood," Carl observed, surveying the scene. "No signs of struggle." "So they just left?" Felix suggested, his youthful face creased with confusion. I picked up a Polaroid photo that had fallen beside one of the backpacks. 2 young men grinned at the camera, raising beer cans in celebration, the massive red arch visible in the background. Their faces were flushed with youth and excitement, unaware of whatever fate awaited them. "Something spooked them," I said, carefully replacing the photo. "Something that made 3 healthy young men abandon their campsite without taking anything. We expanded our search outward from the tent, examining the surrounding area for any sign of the missing campers. Felix discovered a single hiking boot about 50 yards from the site, and Carl found a broken camera strap hanging from a juniper branch. As the afternoon waned, we regrouped with the other search teams. No one had found any further traces of the missing men. The state police were notified, and a more extensive search was planned for the following day. That night, I volunteered for the overnight shift near Delicate Arch, one of the park's most iconic formations. The moon hung full and bright in the clear desert sky, casting the landscape in silver and shadow. I carried a thermos of coffee, a powerful flashlight, and my service weapon, something I rarely felt the need to wear during routine patrols. Around midnight, I perched on a flat rock overlooking the arch, taking a short break and sipping the lukewarm coffee. The silence felt absolute, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through the juniper trees. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the cautious steps of a nocturnal animal, nor the confident stride of another ranger. These sounded wrong somehow, uneven and arrhythmic, as if whatever made them was testing the ground with each step. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Park ranger, identify yourself." No response came, but the footsteps continued, now moving faster, circling my position. I swung my flashlight in an arc, the beam cutting through the darkness. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of something tall and lean slipping behind a distant rock formation, moving with a speed that seemed impossible for its size. My radio crackled, making me jump. "Base to Kincaid, everything okay out there?" It was Dale monitoring from the ranger station. "I think someone's out here," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Moving in the Delicate Arch area." "Probably just late hikers," Dale suggested. "People like to see the arch by moonlight." "Maybe," I agreed, though I didn't believe it. No hiker moved like that. "I'll check it out." Rising from my perch, I moved cautiously toward where I'd seen the figure disappear. The sandy ground showed strange impressions, similar to the tracks Carl and I had discovered, but larger and deeper, as if whatever made them had been running. The tracks led to a sheer rock face and simply stopped, as though their maker had either scaled the vertical surface or vanished into thin air. I stood staring up at the towering stone, an inexplicable dread settling over me like a physical weight. "Come on, Ricky," I muttered to myself. "It's probably just a person looking for a shortcut." But it didn't feel that way. A person would have answered my call, would have carried a light of their own. This thing had vanished without a sound, leaving only those unsettling tracks as evidence of its passage. When my shift ended at dawn, I reported the incident to Dale, who frowned at my description. "We better keep an eye out," he said. "Maybe we've got a trespasser messing with folks." If only it had been something so simple. The atmosphere among park staff grew increasingly tense over the following days. The search for the missing campers continued without success, and rumors began to circulate among both rangers and visitors. Some suggested there might be a rogue mountain lion. Others theorized about a serial killer using the remote park as hunting grounds. I kept quiet about what I'd glimpsed that night near Delicate Arch, though Carl seemed to sense my unease. "Saw something, didn't you?" he asked quietly as we restocked our emergency kits in the equipment shed. When I hesitated, he nodded knowingly. "Yeah, thought so. I've been seeing things too. Mostly at night, mostly just glimpses." "What do you think it is?" I ventured, relieved to find someone who might understand. Carl's weathered face creased with concern. "Don't know. But whatever it is, it doesn't belong here." 2 days later, a call crackled over my radio that changed everything. "Ricky, I need you at Devil's Garden Trail now." It was Felix, his usually cheerful voice strained and trembling. I drove as fast as the park roads allowed, arriving at the trailhead to find Felix standing near a scrub oak, his ranger hat clutched in his hands, face ashen. When he saw me approach, he simply pointed toward a shallow depression behind a large boulder. The sight that greeted me remains etched in my memory with terrible clarity. Sprawled on the sandy ground lay a body, one of the missing campers, identifiable by the University of Colorado sweatshirt described in the official report. The young man's chest had been torn open with savage force, his arms bent at impossible angles. But what disturbed me most were the wounds themselves. They didn't resemble any animal attack I've ever seen. There were no obvious bite marks, no standard predatory pattern. Instead, it looked as though something had pressed or pulled with immense strength, using appendages that resembled hands more than claws. I had to fight the urge to vomit. "Felix," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who found him?" "Early morning hikers," he replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "German couple. They're with Dale now." We secured the scene and waited for the authorities to arrive. State police and county coroner's personnel spent hours examining the body and surrounding area, their expressions growing more puzzled as they worked. "What do you think did this?" I overheard one officer ask the coroner. The older man shook his head. "Not like any animal attack I've seen. These wounds," he gestured vaguely, "it's almost methodical." The park administration decided to close certain trails pending investigation, citing dangerous conditions without specificity. Rumors spread among staff. Some said it was a rogue big cat. Others suggested a deranged person living off-grid in the canyons. But the evidence didn't fit either theory neatly. People don't twist deer necks or leave foxes on arches. Not like that. That evening, Dale called an emergency staff meeting. "I know everyone's shaken up," he began, looking around at our solemn faces. "The official investigation is ongoing, but until we know what we're dealing with, no one patrols alone, especially after sunset." "Has anyone checked the backcountry cameras?" asked Marjorie, our administrative assistant who rarely participated in field operations. Dale nodded. "Nothing useful. Whatever's out there, it's avoiding the established monitoring points." After the meeting, Carl pulled me aside. "Tomorrow morning," he whispered, "you and me. There's a place I want to check." At dawn the next day, we took a service jeep down a rarely used dirt road that wound through the western section of the park. Carl drove in silence, his usual talkative nature subdued by our grim purpose. "I found unusual tracks out here last week," he finally explained as we parked near a towering sandstone wall. "Figured maybe our visitor has a den somewhere in these canyons." We moved quietly through the landscape, our boots crunching softly on the sandy soil. The air was still cool, the rising sun just beginning to paint the tops of the rock formations with golden light. "Listen," Carl whispered, suddenly freezing in place. I held my breath, straining to hear what had caught his attention. Then I heard it. A scraping sound like something hard dragging across stone coming from high above. Slowly, I tilted my head back to look up the sandstone wall beside us. There it was, perched on a narrow ledge about 30 feet overhead. The creature stood on two legs but hunched forward, its body a grotesque mockery of human form. Its limbs were disproportionately long, with jointed extensions that reminded me sickeningly of fingers, but too numerous and flexible. Its skin was an ashen gray that blended with the rock, textured like weathered leather. The head was somewhat triangular, with two close-set eyes that reflected the morning light with a cold, oily gleam. I couldn't discern pupils clearly, just that unnerving, reflective quality. Most disturbing was how it moved. Each joint seemed to have a range of motion beyond anything natural, bending in directions that made my stomach clench with instinctive revulsion. "Dear God," Carl muttered under his breath, raising his revolver with a trembling hand. Before he could fire, the creature unfurled its limbs and leaped, covering an impossible distance to land behind a boulder some 20 yards away. The movement was fluid yet utterly alien, not the bound of a mammal but something more akin to a spider dropping from its web. "Run!" Carl shouted, already backing toward the jeep. "Get in! Start the engine!" I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted to the vehicle, fumbling with the keys as adrenaline made my hands shake. The engine roared to life just as Carl reached the passenger side, his face pale beneath his tan. Through the windshield, I saw the creature emerge again, circling us at a cautious distance. Its movements were unnervingly precise, each step calculated as it maintained a perfect distance while studying our reactions. Those reflective eyes remained fixed on us, unblinking and assessing. Carl fired a warning shot that kicked up dust near the creature's feet. It flinched at the sound, then darted behind another rock formation with that same impossible speed. We didn't wait to see if it would return. I slammed the Jeep into gear and drove away, the tires spitting sand as we accelerated down the rough track. "What the hell was that?" I gasped when we'd put several miles between us and the encounter. Carl's hand shook as he holstered his weapon. "Don't know," he admitted, "but it's what's been hunting in the park." We reported the incident to Dale immediately upon our return. Though skeptical at first, the genuine fear in our descriptions convinced him to take action. Wildlife officials were notified, though they sounded dubious over the phone. "The desert doesn't usually host anything like that," one official remarked. "Probably just a mountain lion you saw in poor light conditions." But Dale believed us enough to dispatch more patrols and request specialized tracking equipment from the regional office. "Whatever it is," he told us grimly, "we need to find it before anyone else gets hurt." 3 days later at dusk I was conducting my patrol near Balanced Rock, one of the park's most photographed formations. The tourists had all departed for the day, leaving me alone in the growing shadows as the sun dipped below the western horizon. That's when I smelled it again. The same foul odor I'd encountered with the animal carcasses, only stronger now, almost overwhelming. Following my nose, I moved cautiously around the base of the formation, my flashlight beam sweeping the ground ahead. The light passed over something pale among the brush. I froze, then slowly redirected the beam. Another body lay sprawled on the sandy ground. One of the other missing hikers, his once youthful face now contorted in an expression of terror. Like the previous victim, his chest cavity had been torn open, but this time there were strange, precise puncture wounds along his limbs, as if something had systematically tested different points on his body. Footsteps behind me made me whirl around, my heart hammering in my chest. There it stood, about 20 feet away. The creature from the canyon, fully visible in the beam of my flashlight. No cover between us, no mistaking what I was seeing. It was taller than I'd initially thought, nearly 7 feet when fully upright, though it maintained that unsettling forward hunch. In the direct light, I could see more details of its anatomy, the way its limbs seemed to contain too many joints, the strange texture of its skin that appeared both rough and oddly reflective, like wet stone. Its face was more visible now, not quite a muzzle, not quite human, with a lipless mouth that wrapped around the lower portion of its triangular head. No visible ears, just small openings on either side of its skull. Those eyes, though, large, unblinking, with horizontal pupils like a goat's, reflecting my flashlight beam with an eerie blue-green luminescence. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stand firm and raise my sidearm. I can't describe the look in its eyes, but I sensed it understood I posed a threat. It made no sound, no growl, no hiss, nothing to suggest vocalizations were part of its communication. It moved one step closer, head tilting slightly as if curious about my potential reaction. I fired a single shot, the sound deafening in the stillness. The bullet missed, kicking up sand near the creature's feet. It reacted instantly, sprinting away with that same impossible speed I'd witnessed before, vanishing among the rocks with fluid, silent movements. I radioed for backup with shaking hands, my voice cracking as I reported both the body discovery and the creature sighting. Within minutes, multiple park vehicles converged on my location, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. That night, I sat in my cabin, hands still trembling as I sipped stale coffee that did nothing to calm my nerves. Felix had come by after we secured the scene, along with Carl and 2 other rangers. We spoke in low voices, trying to rationalize what we'd witnessed. "Maybe it's some kind of mutated animal," Felix suggested, pacing nervously. "An escaped lab specimen or something." "No lab creates things like that," I countered. Carl nodded solemnly. I've heard stories over the years. Strange sightings in remote canyons. Thought they were just old tales to scare tourists. Anyone want more coffee? I asked with forced brightness, trying to break the oppressive mood. Next time I'll set out a bowl of cereal and see if it prefers Cheerios or Cap'n Crunch. Nobody laughed. We tried to lighten the atmosphere, but it felt hollow and desperate. When the others finally left, I double-checked every lock on my cabin doors and windows, knowing full well that if the creature wanted entry, conventional security measures would likely prove futile. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, each creak of the cabin jerking me back to wakefulness, my hand instinctively reaching for the weapon I'd placed beside my pillow. Whatever stalked the arches had revealed itself now, and I couldn't shake the terrible certainty that our confrontations were only beginning. By the following week, the park authorities had brought in a specialized team, consisting of wildlife experts, 2 state troopers, and a cryptozoologist from a nearby university who'd been studying unusual animal sightings in the Southwest. The official story told to the public involved a rogue predator, possibly a mountain lion, though no one who'd seen the creature believed this explanation. The park remained partially closed, with only the most accessible and easily monitored areas open to visitors. Rangers patrolled in pairs, armed with tranquilizer guns and live ammunition as a last resort. I was paired with Dr. Eleanor Reeves, the cryptozoologist, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and the focused intensity of someone accustomed to being ridiculed for her research. I've documented 17 separate accounts of bipedal, non-human entities in this region over the past decade, she informed me as we hiked toward Windows section. Most dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications, of course. And what do you think they are? I asked, scanning our surroundings with heightened awareness. She adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. Something that's managed to stay hidden, living in the margins of human awareness. Whether it's an undiscovered species or something else entirely, that's what I'm here to determine. We spent the day examining various locations where the creature had been spotted, or where evidence of its activities had been found. Dr. Reeves collected samples of the strange tracks, carefully making plaster casts and photographing each impression. "These are fascinating," she murmured, studying a particularly clear footprint. The structure suggests a digitigrade locomotion, walking on toes rather than flat feet, but with manipulative capabilities more advanced than any known predator. As the sun began to set, we joined the larger team at a designated meeting point. A plan had been formulated for a nighttime operation, using the creature's apparent nocturnal habits to our advantage. "We've identified a narrow canyon that shows signs of regular usage," explained Trooper Daniels, a stern-faced man who seemed skeptical of the whole endeavor. "We'll set up containment at both ends and use night vision equipment to monitor the area." I was assigned to a position overlooking the canyon, paired with one of the wildlife experts, a taciturn man named Harkins, who specialized in large predator behavior. We settled into our vantage point as darkness fell, equipped with night vision goggles and tranquilizer rifles. Hours passed in tense silence. The moon rose, casting the landscape in silvery light that created deep shadows among the rock formations. My eyes burned from the strain of constant vigilance, and my back ached from maintaining our concealed position. Around midnight, our radios crackled with a whispered alert from Trooper Evans at the opposite end of the canyon. "Movement at the south entrance. Something coming in." I raised my night vision goggles, scanning the rocky terrain below. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of a crevice. The creature, moving with that unsettling fluid grace I'd witnessed before. In the green-tinted view of the night vision, its form seemed even more alien. It paused occasionally, head tilting as if listening or scenting the air. It moved deliberately toward the center of the canyon where the team had placed bait, a freshly killed deer carcass obtained from a recent road accident. "Target approaching the bait," Harkins whispered into his radio. "All units hold position." The creature reached the deer carcass and circled it warily, never turning its back to any direction for long. After a careful inspection, it crouched beside the dead animal and began to manipulate the body with those long, jointed limbs. examining it in a way that seemed almost curious. "Ready with tranquilizer," came Dr. Reeves's voice over the radio. She had positioned herself closest to the bait, hidden behind a boulder with the best shooting angle. The creature suddenly went rigid, its head snapping up and turning directly toward Dr. Reeves's position, though she remained completely concealed from any normal line of sight. "It knows," I whispered, a chill running down my spine. "It knows we're here." Before anyone could respond, the creature abandoned the deer and darted toward a rock face with frightening speed. Dr. Reeves fired her tranquilizer gun. I heard the soft thump of compressed air, followed by the creature's sudden stumble as the dart found its mark. "Hit!" she called triumphantly. For a moment, the creature swayed, its movements becoming erratic. Then, to our astonishment, it reached back and wrenched the dart from its body with a quick, precise movement. It issued the first sound I'd ever heard from it, a high, keening noise that vibrated in my skull like feedback from a microphone. "Jesus," breathed Harkins beside me, lowering his goggles in shock. The creature leaped upward, scaling the vertical canyon wall with impossible agility, despite the tranquilizer dose. It vanished over the rim before anyone could reposition for another shot. "All units converge on the west rim," Trooper Daniels ordered over the radio. "Don't let it escape the perimeter." What followed was a chaotic pursuit through the moonlit desert landscape. We caught occasional glimpses of the creature bounding between rock formations, always just ahead of our tactical lights and tracking equipment. Despite the powerful tranquilizer it had received, enough to down a full-grown elk, it showed only minimal signs of impairment. Near an ancient juniper tree, we found the broken dart lying on the ground, most of its contents apparently expelled before the drug could take full effect. By dawn, we had lost the trail completely. The team regrouped, exhausted and frustrated, at the park headquarters. "It demonstrated problem-solving intelligence," Dr. Reeves noted, examining the recovered dart. "It recognized the threat and knew to remove the foreign object immediately." "And it knew we were there," I added, "before anyone moved or made a sound." The cryptozoologist nodded thoughtfully. "Enhanced sensory perception. Perhaps it can detect heartbeats or body heat beyond normal parameters." The following morning brought fresh horror. A lone backpacker, a man who hadn't registered at the visitor center, was found near a remote trailhead. His body displayed the same catastrophic injuries as the previous victims, but with one disturbing addition: surgical-like incisions along the base of the skull and spine. "It's learning," Dr. Reeves murmured as we observed the coroner's team processing the scene, examining its prey more thoroughly each time. Trooper Daniels insisted we needed to close off a larger section of the park. Dale reluctantly agreed, knowing the economic impact would be severe but unwilling to risk more lives. My stomach felt permanently soured, anxiety a constant companion. The majestic beauty of the red rocks and open sky had been tainted by an invisible menace that seemed to move through the landscape at will, observing us while remaining just beyond our understanding. That evening, as I packed my gear for another night operation, Carl knocked on my cabin door. His usually composed demeanor had given way to visible strain, with dark circles under his eyes and a slight tremor in his hands. "Ricky," he said without preamble, "I'm putting in my notice tomorrow. 20 years in this park and I can't do it anymore." I nodded, understanding completely. No scenery is worth this kind of fear. "You should consider the same," he advised, glancing nervously at the darkening sky outside my window. "Whatever that thing is, it's not going to stop. And we're not equipped to deal with it." As he turned to leave, he added quietly, "Be careful out there tonight. That thing, it's not just hunting for food, it's studying us." Those words echoed in my mind as I joined the night patrol. Despite all logic suggesting I should follow Carl's example and resign immediately, some stubborn part of me needed one final patrol. Perhaps to convince myself that the beauty I'd found in this place hadn't been completely destroyed by the shadow now lurking among the arches. I volunteered for one last night shift near the windows section, a collection of massive stone arches that resembled giant spectacles set against the desert landscape. Though the specialized team had planned another coordinated hunt, I requested a solo patrol in a different area, hoping to cover more ground in our search. Dr. Reeves reluctantly agreed, providing me with a more powerful tranquilizer rifle and a tracking device to be activated if I encountered the creature. "Don't try to engage it," she warned. "Just mark the location and withdraw immediately." The night was clear and cool, with a 3/4 moon providing adequate light for navigation without completely eliminating the protective shadows. I moved cautiously along the trail, every sense heightened to painful acuity. Each rustle of wind through juniper branches, each distant call of a night bird sent adrenaline coursing through my system. Around midnight, I reached a viewpoint overlooking the north and south windows, 2 massive arches side by side in the sandstone wall. I paused to rest, sipping coffee from my thermos while scanning the silent landscape below. That's when I noticed them. Footprints in the sandy soil, eerily similar to those we've been tracking. They led toward a series of rocks where no established trail existed. Fresh prints, the edges still crisp and undisturbed by wind. My first instinct was to radio for backup, but something held me back. Perhaps a primal curiosity, or maybe just the stubborn need to face what had transformed my peaceful park into a place of dread. Switching on my flashlight, I followed the tracks, moving as quietly as possible while maintaining awareness of my surroundings. The trail led through a narrow passage between towering sandstone walls, eventually reaching what appeared to be a dead-end corner formed by a cliff face. The track stopped abruptly at the base of the wall. I crouched down, examining the final imprints. They didn't show any indication of the creature changing direction or doubling back. They simply ended, as though whatever made them had vanished into thin air, or gone straight up. A faint scraping sound echoed above, sending ice through my veins. Slowly, my hand trembling, I tilted my head back and raised the flashlight beam upward. There it was, clinging to the rock face some 30 feet above me. The creature's ashen body was nearly indistinguishable from the sandstone in the moonlight, but its eyes caught my flashlight beam and reflected it back with that unnerving luminescence. My throat went dry as it shifted position, those multi-jointed limbs adjusting its grip on the vertical surface. It wasn't retreating this time. It was observing me, head tilted at that same curious angle I'd noticed before. I stepped backward slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might trigger an attack. My hand found the tranquilizer rifle slung across my back, but I hesitated to bring it forward, fearing that any aggressive gesture would provoke the creature. It made no sound, continuing its silent study of my movements. I wondered, with a chill, how many times it had watched us without our knowledge, rangers and visitors alike, learning our patterns, our behaviors, our vulnerabilities. "What are you?" I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. The creature's head tilted further, almost as if it were considering my question. Then, with a deliberate movement that made my heart skip, it began to descend the rock face, not retreating upward as it had in previous encounters, but coming down toward me with measured precision. I raised my sidearm instinctively, fingers numb with fear but determined to protect myself. "Stay back," I warned, knowing the futility of speaking to something that likely didn't comprehend human language. For a moment, it paused, those luminous eyes fixed on the weapon in my hand. Then it continued its descent, each movement calculated and fluid. When it reached a point about 15 feet above the ground, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I flicked the flashlight away for half a second to find better footing, preparing to retreat while maintaining a line of sight on the creature. In that brief moment of diverted attention, I heard a scratch, a whisper of movement, and when I aimed the beam again, the creature was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs as I swung the light in all directions, trying to locate where it had vanished to. The narrow canyon suddenly seemed full of potential hiding places, shadows that could conceal something waiting to strike. A soft scraping sound came from behind me. I whirled around, raising both the light and my weapon, but saw nothing except the empty trail leading back toward the main path. That's when I realized the creature's strategy. It wasn't retreating. It was circling. Moving as quickly as I dared, I began backing toward the wider trail, unwilling to turn my back completely but desperate to reach open ground. Each step felt like an eternity, each shadow potentially concealing the thing that hunted me. When I finally emerged from the narrow passage, I immediately radioed my position. "Possible contact at window section," I reported, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing pulse. "Request immediate backup." "Copy that," came Dr. Reeves' response. "Stay in the open. Team is en route to your position." As I waited, I positioned myself with my back to a large boulder, providing at least some protection from behind while maintaining a clear view of the passage I'd just exited. Minutes stretched like hours, the silence broken only by the soft whisper of desert wind and my own rapid breathing. Movement flickered at the corner of my vision, a dark shape slipping between two distant rock formations. I swung my light toward it, but caught only empty air. "Where are you?" I muttered, scanning the landscape with growing dread. The radio crackled again. "Kincaid, we're 5 minutes out. Any visual?" "Negative," I replied. "Lost contact, but—" A sound directly above me cut my transmission short. Slowly, I tilted my head back and raised the light. The creature clung to the boulder above me, its body contorted in a way that defied natural anatomy. Limbs splayed across the stone surface like a spider poised to drop on its prey. Those reflective eyes stared down at me, unblinking and alien. I threw myself sideways just as it released its grip, landing with impossible lightness exactly where I'd been standing moments before. I rolled to my feet, weapon raised, and fired 2 shots in rapid succession. The creature twisted with that uncanny flexibility, the bullet striking stone as it darted sideways at blinding speed. It circled me now, moving just at the edge of my light's reach, testing my reactions, looking for an opening. In that moment, facing this unknown predator alone under the vast desert sky, a strange clarity came over me. This creature didn't belong here, not in the sense of being an invasive species or unknown predator. It seemed fundamentally wrong, as if it existed partly in our reality and partly in some other domain we couldn't comprehend. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the standoff. Headlights appeared on the access road, cutting through the darkness as the team arrived. The creature's head snapped toward the new threat, those reflective eyes narrowing. For a brief moment, it turned back to me, and I experienced an uncomfortable sensation, as if it was memorizing my face, cataloging me for some future purpose. Then, with that same impossible speed, it bounded away into the darkness, scaling a vertical rock face and vanishing over the rim before the approaching team could even exit their vehicles. Dr. Reeves reached me first, tranquilizer rifle ready. "Are you all right? Did it attack you?" I shook my head, still processing what had just occurred. "No. It was studying me. It had the opportunity but didn't take it." She looked troubled by this information. "That supports my theory. This isn't simple predatory behavior. There's intelligence behind its actions. Calculated, methodical intelligence." The team spread out, searching the area with powerful lights and tracking equipment. But as with previous encounters, the creature had vanished without a trace. By dawn, the search was called off, with plans to resume later that day with additional resources. I returned to my cabin as the first light painted the distant formations. My hands still trembled slightly as I made coffee, replaying the encounter in my mind. The way it had watched me, head tilted in that unsettlingly curious manner, suggested something more complex than simple hunger or territorial defense. It was learning, adapting, perhaps even communicating in its own inscrutable way. My decision crystallized in that moment. I couldn't stay here, not with that thing moving freely through the landscape I'd once found so peaceful. No matter how beautiful the scenery, no job was worth the constant dread that now accompanied every sunset. I typed my resignation letter that morning, printing it on the old dot matrix printer in the ranger station. Carl had already submitted his, and Felix was considering the same. We weren't the only ones. 3 seasonal rangers had already departed, citing family emergencies or health concerns. Dale accepted my resignation with a solemn nod. "Can't say I blame you, Ricky. Truth is, I'm not sure how much longer any of us should stay." 2 days later, as I packed the last of my belongings into my truck, Dr. Reeves stopped by. She looked exhausted, the past weeks having taken an obvious toll. "We're scaling back the operation," she informed me. "The official story is that we've dealt with the rogue predator responsible for the incidents. The park will fully reopen next week." "But you haven't caught it," I pointed out. She sighed heavily. "No. And to be honest, I'm not sure conventional methods would work even if we did. This entity, it's beyond our current understanding." "So you're just giving up? After what happened to those people?" "Not giving up," she clarified. "Changing strategies. We'll maintain remote monitoring, gather more data, try to understand what we're dealing with before confronting it again." I nodded, though the explanation felt hollow, a bureaucratic response to something that defied bureaucratic solutions. As I drove away from Arches National Park that afternoon, I watched the massive red formations recede in my rearview mirror. Once, I had found them majestic and inspiring. Now I could only see them as potential hiding places for something that didn't belong in our world, something that watched and waited and learned from the shadows. I returned to St. Louis, finding a job with the city parks department that kept me surrounded by people and well-maintained landscapes with few hiding places. I never spoke publicly about what happened at Arches. Who would believe such a tale? Carl called occasionally during that first year away. He'd relocated to Arizona, taken a position managing a small nature preserve with wide-open spaces and excellent visibility in all directions. He never mentioned the creature directly during these calls, but I could hear the lingering tension in his voice when the conversation drifted toward our time in Utah. The official story told to the public was that a rogue mountain lion had been responsible for the deaths and that authorities had handled the situation. No one ever provided proof of this resolution, but the incidents faded from public memory as new tragedies claimed attention. I still think about that thing sometimes. Late at night in my quiet apartment in Missouri, I imagine its thin silhouette against red stone and the terrible silence it carried with it. I still see the faces of those poor souls we found, and the baffled looks of the wildlife team as they tried to explain what couldn't be explained. I carry that memory with me like a scar that never fully heals. And if anyone ever asks why I left that ranger job after just 1 season, I say I needed a change of scenery. But that's not the truth. The truth is I never want to wander through those arches again, never want to feel that dread under the silent desert sky. The desert keeps its secrets, and some paths are best left untraveled. Sometimes when I wake suddenly in the night for no apparent reason, I find myself staring at my bedroom window, half expecting to see reflective eyes peering in from the darkness. And in those moments, I wonder if it remembers me as clearly as I remember it. If somewhere in the remote canyons of Utah, something still waits, watches, and learns.